So welcome to the meeting. And Gab, if you would establish a quorum, please, ma'am.
Yeah, we have everybody but John Smith and Dr. Smith. So the Smiths are missing.
Dismiss, please. So we do have a quorum. We got 3 sets of minutes that have been distributed electronically. And what I would suggest is that we make a motion to approve all 3 of them. Unless you have an issue with one particular set of agenda, minutes, and we can go back and deal with that.
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve all 3.
Second.
Any discussion, anything that we need to amend on any of those minutes? All in favor? Anybody against, please say, I'm against. All right, thank you. Now Liz is not here. Gina, are you gonna do the GTC update?
I can do just a brief one. Meeting was last week. The big thing, was the FY 26 budget was approved at the commission meeting, so. And the executive package with Liz's summary is online, so.
One of the other things that I thought was interesting, Navison and Memorial, those 2 hospitals, have been working on a ditch to door, if you will. I don't think they call it that, but we have for a long time been trying to figure out how long it takes to get a patient from the side of the road to a level 1 or 2 center if they're critically injured. So they have finished one survey or one study, and the idea was, does that time impact the survivability of the patient? And what they came back with, that there was essentially no statistical difference in the study they did. They did recognize the fact that a large number of the patients they were looking at were stable hip fractures or stable long bone fractures. So in doing that, they recognized that may be skewing the data. So I at least think that they're going to try to go back and start looking now at critical trauma if it's particular hemorrhage. If you got blunt force trauma and the patient's in shock from that, does that make a difference? Because if you break your hip, it's going to be broke today, it's going to be broke tomorrow. It is a significant injury, particularly for older people, because of the clots and this sort of thing downstream. So, but the initial timing probably isn't that crucial. So at least I think they were going to go back and try to look now and look at those other subset of traumatic injury and try to figure that out.
They were specifically looking at transfers.
Yes.
So that was the population they were looking at for interfacility transfers to the trauma center. So, they're actually, gonna work some with GWIP and the data we have. So they had just those 2 centers, Memorial and, Navison, and they're gonna expand. I've had some discussions with Dr. Dunn, and expand the data set because it is limited when you just have those 2 centers. And they just looked at a couple of years. So we have now, 3 years in the GWIP, central repository that we could potentially look at. And that would also expand the numbers of centers that we could look at and have more patients with critical injuries and look at those times a little more. So that's.
I think one of the biggest frustrations for them and for me over the years is trying to get that first leg information when they take them to a rural hospital and then they're later transferred to a level 1 or 2 center. And I think I'm right. They say about 28% of that data is just that they found. And that kind of worries me a lot because I don't know where the data's falling out, whether the initial crew didn't present the trip report or some kind of trip data at the time they arrived at the rural hospital, or whether they brought the trip report and then that didn't get sent. Either way, the tertiary centers are not receiving that data and going back trying to collect it, they can't seem to find it. So I did some thinking about that. And I think one of our problems is that I figure we got somewhere in the area of 16,000 data collection people out there. So every medic that does a trip report is a data collector for us. And there's a huge variation there. I don't know that we will ever resolve that particular problem. But I would appreciate it if you go back to your regions to impress on them the importance of getting their trip report done timely. And I do know that large volume services have some issues with that, just the time frame. You sit there and do a trip report and you answer that next call. And the answer is you answer that next call. But at the same time, please ask them as best they can to get those trip reports timely so that we can use that to try to figure out what's going on there.
Courtney,
yeah.
I have a question. This is Pete. I may have missed it. Who's going to do the analysis on all the data, and are they going to use variables, for example, exceptions like inclement weather, things like railroad tracks blocked by, unmoving train, things like that, like in a normal 911 exception log, or are those things going to be utilized to have different scenarios? Because not everything is apples to apples.
Yeah, and Pete, it's my understanding right now, no, that they're just trying to get the gross data more or less.
Okay.
And they're not, again, it's not, none of it is designed to go beat anybody over the head, so you get right or wrong. But it is designed to try to figure out what is going on. And then we can start drilling down to that sort of thing. Because just your point, there's gonna be some things that are gonna interfere with it no matter, and you can't stop that train. And you can't change the weather, those sorts of things. But over a period of time, those things should kind of blend in with the data set. If you see outliers, you may want to pull those out, but folks working on it are the data folks at Memorial and Navasset and Macon. Those are the two sets that we're working on.
Thank you.
Any other questions there? Tim, ADLS report update.
Okay. The data's a little old. You all have copies of the information. I don't know whether you had any questions or not, but if we just look through the report, you'll see there's been a sort of standard amount of maintenance calls and so on and so forth through the first quarter, or the last quarter. And a lot of activating sims, changing things that are getting new equipment, and then ABLS troubleshooting this problem or that problem, which ends up getting units replaced or whatever the case may be. So there's a fair amount of that that's going on. But basically, our biggest issue in the field right now is simply getting the folks that can do the installations for people when they need them. In the small agencies, they don't have access to those resources. So it's one of the things I want to talk to you about in a minute, but you can see the usage there. Basically 84% in the prior quarter, 82% this time. There's some things that are down and changing. As always, there are units in flux because there are vehicles that are out of service and then back in service and so on. So I think it's basically stable at what it is. But we're running about 1,092 active units out of about 1,337 that are out there. So at any given time, we've got over 1,000 trucks out there with the ABLS equipment. Okay. And yes.
I was just gonna ask, was there an issue last weekend, I guess, with Southern Link going down?
Yes, there was. Southern Link did some updates and their system went down for a short period of time, and then it repeated itself apparently several times. Before they took them about better part of the day to get it fixed and get them up and running again.
And
So-
and I understand the comment was made that probably the same thing's gonna happen with Verizon and AT&T and.
I think we already seen it at Verizon. Whether that's all gonna happen or not, I don't know. I've got the people at Sierra Wireless researching that as well to see what we can find out about what's going on there, because they gave us no advance warning or anything about it, so.
So this was a planned upgrade, it just didn't go as planned.
Apparently that's the case, yeah. They, something happened and when it upgraded, it didn't bring all the data and it lost all the saved passwords that were in there that allowed the agencies and the systems to talk to each other. So that's what happened.
Did that impact, and Georgia State Patrol uses that network, did that impact?
I don't know, I never heard anything about the state patrol, but many of the other local agencies as well use that all over. And, the only place I heard it from was from our folks in the field.
I wonder if we could, I had a couple of our providers in Region 10 talk about the problems it created. I wonder if there's a way to get Sierra Wireless to reach out and let you know when they're gonna do that.
If Sierra Wireless knows that they're gonna do it, they do. This was the carrier and Southern Link carrier. And
Or if we can get them, require them to let us know when they're gonna do it.
yeah, it may be more than you ever wanna know though, because they do it pretty constantly. I mean, they've been doing it for a long time and not having any problems. This is one of those times when they had a screw up. So, but yes, I've got a call scheduled with Ken Mobes from Southern Link to talk about the situation and find out. And he'll know what's going on in that whole world too. Okay?
Thank you.
Yep. No fun when the radios go down.
Yeah.
The areas of the state where we don't have coverage right now, we're working on these. And some of them may come along. We've got a couple of initiatives going on, one up in Region 2. One of the things that I really like is they're gonna start using the ABLS when they do EMS exercises, or the EMAs running exercises up there. They'll be specifically evaluating the use of the ABLS for the hospital and the unit agencies. That works great for them because they got one hospital system that's coordinating all those agencies. So we'll see what happens there, and then maybe there's some good opportunities to do some more with that other ways in the state as well. Okay. Airtime. So we're paying for. And you see that Southern Link has actually become the major provider. Going forward, next year, when the MG90s begin to fall off and we start using more of the XR versions, they will be, those units will be 5G capable. Southern Link is not 5G capable, and they don't intend to become 5G capable. So all the units and the new equipment will still work on the Southern Link system, but you won't get the benefit of the 5G capability with that. So that's one of the things we want to take a
So
look
those
at.
systems will still work, they just.
Yeah,
won't come up
they'll
with
still work.
5G
They
speed.
just won't give you that additional capability that's doing it. But I think T-Mobile is gonna become a little more emergent this year. They're being pretty active, and I'm hearing people beginning to say, well, let me try a couple of those T-Mobile SIMs and see what the coverage is in my area. Because they're not getting exactly what they want. But what's that, Brian?
It's not good bull care.
Yeah, I mean, it's not good everywhere, but in good part of the state now it is more even than Verizon have broader coverage. So And it's $10 a month cheaper per truck. So keep that in mind as we look at it. And Verizon, by the way, is going to be lowering their price for us.
Do what now?
Verizon's going to be lowering their price a couple dollars a month. So we'll see what happens with that shortly. Okay, that's all for that. And then, that was where our expenditures were at the end of that quarter. It's a little out of date for what we're gonna be looking at today, but. We've got about $50,000 left, which we'll be spending before the end of July, for July, which we'll be we're gonna buy the MG90s, since they're going out of life cycle, is ending. MG90s are not gonna be available very soon. So we're gonna go ahead and buy some in advance. So we've got them, because some of our agencies, no matter what other systems are dependent on the MG90s right now because of Bluetooth capability. In those that they need, because they're using Bluetooth, 1280 kgs and that sort of thing. So we want to make sure we have some of those. So PSS, our new provider, is going to be holding those in inventory for us and then ship them out as we need them, but we'll have them. Because otherwise, what we don't want to do is run out of MG90s before the new system is up on the AVLS, which is going to happen sometime this fall. Once that's on there, then it won't matter, but except for the Bluetooth people. We want to make sure, again, going forward, that we can cover people who are still using Bluetooth. Bluetooth is going away.
Did we get clarification that the new units, I guess the XR70s, are they gonna be Bluetooth capable? I know you had talked about.
They're working on it. Not now, MP70s are, and MG90s, that's why I want these MG90s. So until they, I'm from Missouri.
So is there any concern about the tariff issue? I'm assuming these are not made in the continental United States.
They're not in China. A lot of their stuff is in Taiwan, so those tariffs will affect it a little bit. But right now, Semtech is saying, no, we don't plan to do anything on these kinds of units for the time being. We just need to see, like everybody there saying, well, what's gonna really happen, But right now, with what they see, I don't see it as a problem.
Was it Taiwan? One of them, they said they were gonna drop the tariffs totally.
Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so much of what we do in this country is now in Taiwan that it's a little special case.
Maybe a little cheaper.
Yeah, right. And then I had a 26 budget that I had submitted with with this report, and it's basically what we're gonna be looking at in a little bit as well. See, there's my program management fee up there, and then the equipment, about $140,000 for equipment in the next year. And that's where some of that we'll be using to buy up some MG90s and first. And then I have reimbursement for installations from up to 30 units at $250 a piece. And that's to fill a need. We have some small agencies out there that don't have access, don't have people that can do those installations, and they don't have access to a good, reliable radio shop that will be that's responsive to them. So we've got folks like Terry's got a guy at his place that can help out, and Bullitt County's got their place, and then different places people have, and they've volunteered to go help in lots of cases. But if they have to go out and install a unit and stuff like that, they ought to get paid for that. So what I'm proposing is that those agencies that you allow me to sort of pick the ones who really need it and where it's holding up the system, that they can't get them installed. And that they're having problems getting the money from their jurisdiction, whatever the case may be, that I can go ahead and tell them to hire one of those guys and then submit their receipt from the agency to the commission for reimbursement. And do,
And we were talking earlier, Tim and I thought we had agreed to that at a previous meeting.
Yeah, we did.
we talked about it, but we didn't vote, you didn't vote on it, so that's why I just
So
wanted.
what I'm hearing, what I'm, on our side of the street, we think it's done and you're done. But you're, on your side of the street, you'd rather have a motion to say it's perfectly all right, so you would feel better.
Yes, I think, and I just wanna make sure it's, make me feel better, but also make sure we're all on the same boat about it.
I'll make a motion.
We just wanted to approve this whole budget?
We did vote on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we voted on it and we approved it in the 25 budget, but we did have time to get it off the ground and running before the end of the fiscal year, so we put it in the 2026 budget.
Okay. Cool,
So after July 1, you can start doing it.
Yes.
okay,
Is that fair?
okay, that's good,
Yep.
Okay.
that's great.
Thank you.
I just wanna make sure that if we're gonna do something, I think it's a fair thing to do, to help out and that sort of thing and whatever, and that if I do that sort of thing, that you guys know what I'm doing out there, so if somebody says, hey, you know, how come they're not paying for me? You know, well, because you got 55 units and you got 3 IT guys on your staff, you know, so.
Well, hopefully that won't come up, but if it becomes a problem, we may have to.
Yeah.
To deal with it, because I don't know how to cut and slice and say one is desperate and the other's not.
Yeah, I know, it's gonna be, we'll just have to play it by ear and see what goes along. Okay? That's it.
Any questions for Tim? All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Tim, are you online?
Yes, sir, I am. Can you hear me?
Can, thank you.
Okay. Good morning, everyone, and happy EMS week to everyone there and also to our providers across the state. You do have the report that we had submitted at the end of March, and what I wanted to do is I wanted to give just our updates through April, May, and what we have coming up in June. Just to add to that, so briefly, I'll go through the courses that we still have, either we've completed or that are still outstanding to be completed through June. We have, in April, we had 2 TECC classes, one in Region 7, one in Region 2, a Trauma Skills Lab in Region 10, Auto Extrication in Region 8, and an Axioms class. In May, we just completed Module 2 of the Leadership Program, so 2 down, 2 more to go. We had a TECC class in Region 9, a Trauma Skills Lab in Region 9. Both of those took place last week. Next week, we have an extrication course scheduled for Region 9, mental health first aid class, and a moulage class in Region 5. In June, we have an intro to leadership class scheduled, an initial ropes course in Region 1, a TECC course in Region 3, trauma skills lab in Region 5, a mental health first aid course, a ropes course in Region 10, an extrication course in Region 1, and a TECC course in Region 8. The only thing that I don't have for you to update on this is the actual number of contact hours. I will be getting that to everyone, but I can tell you that we are either on track, we're on track to either meet or exceed that number again in this fiscal year. Mr. Chairman, with that, I'll answer any questions about where we are with our training efforts or anything related to the association.
Any questions of Kim?
Kim, how many EMT classes do y'all have in progress?
Terry, I'm going to have to get you a number on that. It changed. Actually, I was in a conversation with Travis and Kathy last week, so I will get you a number on that and get that to you as soon as possible.
Kim, on a regular basis, we have big folks who sign up, are awarded a grant, and then for one reason or another, don't do the class. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, sir, that's a fair statement. And what we do is what we have done as far as the EMR, EMT classes and the other classes as well are the NAMT discipline classes, is that when those classes are not able to be fulfilled for whatever reason, then we go back to our application process, and that has secured, at least for the last many years that anyone who has applied for an EMR program or an NAMT class has actually received those classes. It may not be during the initial outlay, but we have gone back and we have awarded all of those classes for anyone who's had a request.
And I'm good with that. I guess my question is, and Terry and I've talked to some other folks. And one of the things that I hope to talk about in a little bit with the budget is the initiative to help instructors. So, and this, I'm just asking for your gut opinion here. Why do they not do the classes? What is their holdup?
It's a combination of things. If it is an instructor issue, we have worked with the state training coordinators and RTACs in many situations to see where we can find instructors for them that are either willing to travel to those areas if they don't already have a developed cadre of instructors. Sometimes it is logistical in location to conduct that class. And sometimes it's because, to be honest with you, they are delayed in getting everything together to put the class on, and we of course want them to try to let us know as far up front as they can on the timing of it, even though it may change, by a little bit. But if they're not going to be able to do it, we try to get them to notify us as soon as possible. That way we can fulfill that class with someone else that has applied for a course.
So sometimes they want to do it and the logistics, one way or the other, don't work out.
Yes, sir. But we've tried to assist them. A lot of times now we do have an extensive cadre of instructors, and we have, called on them for, and a lot of times those are instructors that are traveling to an area to be able to do that, or utilizing our affiliate faculty when it comes to the NAMT courses to be able to assist in getting an instructor signed off. A lot of times these are instructors that have been teaching for quite a while. They just haven't gone through the process of the online instructor course with NAMT and actually doing that final check off as either an instructor or a coordinator for those classes.
Okay. Any other questions?
I got a potential motion. I sent out an email a few weeks ago, and I was gonna see if I needed to formalize that request in a motion, or.
I think that would be more than fair, but can we do it at the budget discussion?
Sure.
I think that would be a great thing to do, and just would rather put it into that budget because it involves the money.
Okay.
That fair?
Courtney, the only other thing that I overlooked adding to this is something that we're working on with Jeremy with MedEd Prep to establish a pre-con at our educator conference for him to come in and actually do training and try to fill this gap on some of the areas where we have instructors that are not completely up to speed on that. So we have that in the works now to have that as a pre-con at our conference.
Good, thank you for that. I think will be well received and needed, because there's still some confusion out there in the real world about why we're doing that. And I'll address my concerns about that in a few minutes, and my comments or ideas of improving that process.
Let me clarify one thing, Courtney. The motion that I referred to was allowing a class to start in one budget year and finish in another. Not necessarily about the upcoming budget, but the motion that I was thinking about was allowing a class to start in one fiscal year and end in the next, so that would be in place for this current fiscal year if that needed to be in a motion. So I know I sent an email out.
Either way, if you want to make a motion now, that's fine too. We'll go ahead and take care of it.
Okay. All right. So I'm gonna make a motion, give you a little bit of background. So an EMT class is about 200 hours. So it takes, several months, 6 months probably or so to finish a class, or to start a class and finish a class. So with the deadlines that GEMSA has in order to get a class submitted and turned in, you got to have the ending roster by their deadline to submit. So in essence, you got a period leading up to the end of the fiscal year that no one can start a class because they can't finish the class and get the ending rosters submitted. So there's a period where a class can't be taught. And honestly, with a July to July deadline, a class can never be funded through the summer months because it can't have the beginning and the ending in the same time. So my proposal is going to be, and I'll make it in a motion just a second, but my proposal is going to be, because there's two payments associated with an EMT class. So you have the upfront payment with the beginning roster, and then at the end of it, you have the ending payment with the ending roster. that we could start a class, fund a class that starts in one fiscal year. And then if it ends in the second fiscal year, then we would allow those classes to basically be in progress regardless of any GIMSA deadlines or trauma commission or subcommittee deadlines or fiscal years, so that you could start one and end one at any given time. So any questions about that? I'm gonna make it in a motion, but some of y'all I haven't talked to, so I just kind of want to get a little bit of.
Katie, does that create any issues for you? No? Okay.
I think you initially it created issue before the trust fund. Because bottom line is we were supposed to spend all the money in that fiscal year, and that nutted up everybody, it made a lot. But with the trust fund, it becomes a bit more flexible. So,
Mr. Chairman and Terry, just to clarify that also, we do already have a precedent for doing that because that is how the leadership class is conducted now. We have 2 modules that fall in one fiscal year and 2 that fall in the second. So we already do have a precedent in place for doing it.
Thank you, Kim. Is there any particular questions on that before I make my motion?
you're really supposed to make your votes.
I know. But some people are hearing this for the first time, so I just wanted to give a little bit of background on it. All right, so I'm gonna make a motion that for EMR, EMT, or AMT classes, that we fund a class if it begins in one fiscal year and ends in the second fiscal year, so that someone can start a class. Jimson can pay the beginning roster payment, and then the class finishes in the following fiscal year. So we allow classes to start in one fiscal year and end in the next consecutive fiscal year.
I second the motion.
All right, that was it.
So I'm gonna restate it differently, you keep me.
Yeah, you go ahead.
My way I'm gonna restate it is that we do not, for the EMT and the EMR and the AMT, those not be tied to the fiscal budget.
I don't understand the difference, but I don't.
Hey, there is no
Okay.
difference, there is no difference other than, yours to me is a little confusing,
Okay,
but that's just a little shorter.
Now it's Courtney's idea. That's a different thing.
that's fine with me. As long as we're getting into class, that's my objective, to get more EMTs on the road, so
Does it need
Alright,
another
so-
second, Courtney, or is it good?
we had a second from
Yeah,
someone else.
we good. And I don't care which wording it is, as long as it's clear and everybody understands that we won't be tied to a fiscal year to do those classes. Any other questions? If there's anybody against it, say nay at this point. Hearing none, the motion passes.
Thank you, Courtney. Kim, could y'all send out a communication that just asks the soliciting for any additional classes? I know normally we end our fiscal years in July, but I know we're on a different cycle right now, so people are probably, number one, not accustomed to what we just voted on, but also we're outside of our budget cycle.
Yes, sir. We had already actually come up with one. We were just waiting on the final agreement of everything, but yes, we will get that sent out.
Okay, thank you.
Well, and make sure your letter says that we're doing more classes, because now you're not tied to what's still out there. Because we theoretically gonna put more money into that bucket today, so that whole process can start. Anything else? The EMS funding update, I'm not gonna go into that a whole bunch, other than remind you at the last meeting, which was by far the shortest meeting we've ever had. We voted on allocating $349,000, and that was in that last set of minutes that you got. And those amounts are there and in those minutes. Any questions about that process? So as we go looking at next year's budget, some of these things that are maybe in somebody's budget will have already been pre-approved, and if I know, please, you probably will have noted that in what we're going to do in a few minutes. Is that okay? So I'm gonna say a few things and then we're gonna go into this. Crystal, thank you for the work you and Jeremy have done on the midi prep. I have had some people grouse at me that it's just hadn't worked to their life. And for the life of me, I can't see has had much work to their life, just by requiring their students to do that. I did talk to an instructor who has somehow gotten the idea that the mini prep test had to be done at the end of their class. So instead of taking those tests at the end of a module, which was the way I think it's supposed to be done, they were waiting to the end of the class and giving them all to the students. Okay, so I want y'all to help me get the word out that the mini prep, one, is still a requirement, unless y'all vote to do something different, but it's still a requirement. And that they should have given those modular tests at the end of their module. And the idea behind that is, if, let's just say you do patient assessment, I'm assuming that's one of the first modules that most people do. And they take that exam and then find out they may poor on it. So rather than wait until they took the national registry and find out they haven't grasped those concepts, the instructor knows right then, and we missed something. We missed something, and let's try to figure out what. So I want y'all to help me get that word out to them. And if people say, well, it's not worth my while, ask them to call me, because I need to understand why it's not. Because we don't go back through it and redo the data tonight or today, because it's been presented to you. And it's presented to the Trauma Commission last week. And it looks like we're now able to fairly well predict the student's success on the National Registry by looking at how they do on those exams. And that was the whole intent. Okay, that was the whole intent. We are trying to work through a different process that we're going to be meeting after this meeting. If some of y'all want to be involved, I can put you on the committee. And doing a different way for class registrations, hopefully to make it cleaner and clearer and a lot less work for everybody. Okay, so if you hear some comments about that, if somebody's mad about it, my number is 494-4512. Tell them not to call me in the middle of the night, please. Okay, but any other time they can certainly call me, because I really would like to know if there's issues out there. It's not our intention to make life more difficult for anybody. It's our intention to make life easier, particularly for those instructors who are out there doing it. But at the same time, we want to understand why classes fail. I mean, it's a huge waste of resources to teach a bunch of folks over 5-6 months' time and they don't pass their boards. If we can help them get there to succeed, then that's what I'd like to do.
So, Courtney, just a quick question to clarify. Is it required for all our funded classes, regardless of what their success rate is? Okay. Do we have any data yet that shows that it has made a difference with national registry testing now?
So we had 3 programs that voluntarily submitted their pass data on their cohorts.
Okay.
So not just we had a 70% pass rate, but this student passed on the first, second, or third attempt.
Okay.
And with the formulas that Jeremy has, with 92% accuracy, we could have predicted who was going to pass or fail by several key metrics. There's certain topics in operations, there's a certain percentage in operations and airway in the final exam that, for example, if they make less than a 65 on the final, they only have a 30% chance of passing the national registry. So the data, I will still say, is incredibly early on that because programs were not required to submit that information. So it's just voluntarily, we're asking, hey, can you tell us so that we can validate these data points? And what we're seeing so far is yes, absolutely. Based on just kind of a broad overview of the programs, if you'll remember where we started, was at a 64% pass rate.
Yeah.
I anticipate that we will see a 10% bump in just providing access to the testing. That's before we start offering any additional resources.
Okay.
But again, it's so early because this is
Yeah,
just
I
our
knew.
first year.
Yeah, I figured. One thing I was going to comment about all instructors being required, I mean, as from being an educator for many years of my career and being very successful, I think with there's people who have been successful and now you're adding another component and may say, taking more time to do that, it's not even speculating. I wouldn't be against it, I'm saying that way, some of that resistance coming from.
And I take the comment, well,
Yeah.
here's the deal. You had a great success rate. Can we learn from you utilizing this tool, how to help the others become more successful? So,
Yeah, and I'd be glad to use the tool, but, we fund our own program, so it's,
so
I leave the money for people who need it.
as we get into the budget discussions, and one of the things I'm gonna try to get in there is a particular amount of money to pull you guys who have done a good job, low attrition rates, high pass rates, you got it going on. And we get y'all around the table to help develop a toolkit for two groups, for everybody. But two main groups I would look at are the new instructor who's never done it before. Let's face it, never done it before, it takes a while to get up to speed. And for that instructor to have a toolkit so that they don't have to go back and rework all of the stuff. They don't have to start from scratch, they don't have to reinvent the wheel, okay? And then I want that committee or another committee, we'll have to talk about that. I still want to look at the concept. I really don't believe a 1 week. I don't think you can take a good paramedic and 1 week later produce a good instructor.
I agree.
So, and I compliment the state office of EMS, although the logistics sometimes are difficult with the mentor program. Okay, I think that's a good idea. I'm not downing that in any way, shape, or form. And what I've looked at least in my mind's got, is what we did with the leadership. It's a 4-week program, costs us a lot of money. It's a 4-week program. So think about it, if you brought somebody in and did that initial education, and it's okay, next quarter, I want you to come back with a set of lesson plans. Now, they may grab up the lesson plans we do, I don't care.
Yeah.
But I was talking to Crystal the other day, and I'm naive about a lot of stuff. And I was talking about handing that to them. She said, well, I can't just hand it to them, because some people teach 4 hours a night, some people teach an 8-hour day. So, but that person would then, based on where they're at, would need to be able to cut and paste a given set of lesson plans or curriculum into their schedule, so that when they start teaching, they would have that already done.
I think it's
And
great.
then the next one, we may get some experts to come in on some of the skills and techniques. Years ago, I did a national registry test for paramedics. I failed 2/3 of them, because they didn't check a pulse before or after they put on the traction plan.
Yeah.
Is that important? Yeah. So it may be that and I don't know, because I'm not an instructor. Used to be, Ernie Dawes kicked me to the curb, good for me, good for him. But the instructors who do it every day, they can help us set it up. And I'm not saying it's a year-long 4-module program, because I don't know. It may be 2 courses, it may be 3, it may be whatever. But I want to put some money in the budget so that we can fund a meeting or series of meetings somewhere. So you guys get together and figure out how to do it. And then have somebody who actually does the legwork of putting those things in place.
I think, I'm willing to help out every weekend, and other people in the state. I know the state actually has been trying to come up with a way to be able to address that same thing you're talking about, with getting things that the success, departments would have good success rates and attrition, low attrition, to come together and talk about what they're doing. The main thing I like about Jeremy's program is it's subjecting people to the kind of testing that National Registry has. Because the typical test banks that come with the textbooks, even the latest ones coming out, don't, provide the information the way that National Registry is. It's a lot of multiple choice. It's much different, and people are used to taking that to the subject. So I think it's a great program. And I'm willing to help. I was just trying to say, that's what I think some of that maybe kind of wrong with.
Well,
But I tell you right now, Jeremy gave us a demo of it to use, and we used it. I didn't have it to tie to 2 different classes and say, okay, this worked for this student, but not this student. There's a lot of variables, but the way that y'all are doing it with the module testing, I think will make success.
And at this point in my life, I'm not particularly interested in the EMS subcommittee funding this for every EMS program in the state for two reasons. One, we don't have wherewithal to do that financially. But I'll be honest with you, if we can sit down and prove logically that this saves money, it improves the pass rates, then I would think that the legislature might be willing to fund it statewide.
Yeah. But I will say in essence, it is available because if you have, the state has the program, we have people having difficulty passing, and the training coordinators have access to that platform, correct?
I believe that he does, provide it as a part of the remediation.
Yeah, the
But they have to
remediation.
have failed 3 times before they're participating in those, I believe.
Okay. I think we
Or
gotta
failed
make sure
just once
people are
or
aware
twice.
of that, to go reach out to the training quarters and get that help.
He is, there's gonna be in addition to this next round of testing, that there's gonna be, a national registry simulator, so it'll be an adaptive test that goes, level 5, level 1.
I got 2 questions. So you was talking about a couple of agencies submitted their pass rates voluntarily to you. Is that something, I mean, I see that as being an important view on this. Is that something we need to require?
I think that it will be ideal for that to be as a part of the contract for participating in the grant, is that, we're already asking for rosters, we're already seeing what their grades look like in the program. If we can connect it and correlate all this with national registry success, we're really able to fly with it. Right now, we're just really predictive, just kind of based on what we're looking at in the program. But it's validated if we correlate it to registry, because that's the goal, is to get more into the field. So that would be awesome if it was added to the contract.
I've had some discussion with Crystal about could we work with Richard and find that data? Once they finish the class, theoretically, most instructors say, hey, I've done my thing. At least some instructors do. So we might get some pushback there, but if we can get the data through the state office, and I don't know, it may be a protected. I don't know.
If memory serves, last meeting, Richard said that maybe we could include, that we're gonna have to do an annual report on all the education programs. If we had them send us a copy of their annual report, it would include that past data. But I don't think that's student specific
Yeah.
on that report.
I think
And for us
they
to
would just
correlate it, it needs to be.
How many passed, but that wouldn't give us the information we need.
Correct,
What did little Johnny do?
right.
Yeah.
It gives a broad overview, but not the specifics.
So what would that entail from an instructor standpoint? I'm not an instructor. We have a class,
So
I'm
when-
not an
when
instructor.
people
I know
go-
we track ours,
Yeah.
but but I don't know what that entails.
Okay, so, when somebody tests national registry, all the state gets is that they pass, they don't get their number, they get that, hey, they're licensing now. Because when you go take a test as an instructor, I'm sure you have to go in national registry and you have to sign them off that they're eligible to take the test, correct?
I'm not an instructor, so I'm thinking you
Oh,
are.
okay.
That's,
Yeah,
I'm directing this
okay.
question to you.
Yeah, okay, my bad. I missed the point.
Yeah,
Yeah, so at the end of the class,
Crystal, maybe you can answer.
Yeah.
So the students create an account,
Yeah.
they affiliate with your class. At the end of the program, you go in and say, little Johnny on this day at this time successfully completed the academic coursework and the skills necessary. So you check them off on those 2. Then that allows the student to schedule their exam, with National Registry.
Correct.
On the back end of that, once a student takes that exam, I can log back into my instructor account and I can see who's passed and who failed.
Yeah.
And that's what we want. I don't need the numbers if they were near
Right.
passing or below passing. I just wanna know on their first attempt, their second, or their third, they were successful.
yeah, so that, the state doesn't get that information. All they get is this person now has a pass, a national registry card, and they can license them through the state. So the state can't see the scores or
So when you see that, do you see the score based on modules or based on disciplines or anything, or you just see?
no,
score.
they give a score now that used to be like, usually they didn't give you a number, they just said, these are the categories that you're bad at. Now they have a score, and like 940 is passing. So if somebody gets a 920, they're close, really close. Somebody scores way lower than that, then they need a lot of work. It's kind of what we're based on.
So, but you don't know that they scored really high on these 3.
Used to, we did, we don't.
Richard, has raised his hand.
Yeah, oh, good.
So just clarifying real quick, so the instructor through the National Registry site has access to this information, so it's not like they've got to run the students down and get them to report back, so.
It would be a screenshot, I think it will be a pretty quick report. Maybe we could even set timelines like 4 weeks prior or following completion of your program, you send us your results. Most students within a month should have taken the exam. At least we need to be encouraging them to take it as soon as they finish the program. And I think that even just that time frame is gonna give us the data.
Is that not something the registry can provide?
That's a question for Richard. I could not request that for one of our programs. So
I
I
wonder
think
if the
it's
state,
Richard.
I wonder if the state could request it,
Yeah.
and maybe a canned report they already have.
Yeah, Richard.
Richard.
Yeah, he's right.
Richard's got his hand one way, so he's got all the magic.
Yeah, the answers.
Hey, thanks for the
Richard?
opportunity. Real quick, a couple clarifications on things. What Crystal was talking about that we referenced about the annual report is an option that, of course, the program could send to you. We would not just divulge that information to anyone without a specific request for it going through the proper channels, but you certainly could require that the program that you funded give you that information, which would include down to the cohort level data. So if you funded one particular EMT course with 15 students in it, you would have the data for that cohort. You wouldn't necessarily know whether Richard was one of the X number that passed, or Crystal, or et cetera, et cetera. In terms of what Scott was talking about, the program does get very specific information from National Registry about each individual person. So, it took Richard 3 attempts, it took Crystal 2 attempts, et cetera. The state also gets that information. And if the program was willing, we could, of course, provide it as well. So there is certainly ways to get that information, and we do a fair amount of tracking each individual program and cohort, how they do in terms of, and we used to put that on LMS, and we changed their status. We don't track it that way anymore. We primarily track it through GDAC, which of course is a 3-year third cumulative attempt aggregate data. And then the annual report was designed to allow us to drill down to the individual cohort level. Specifically, like if a program has 3 satellites, we want to be able to look at how Richard did teaching, Scott did teaching, and Crystal did teaching, rather than it be all clumped under the one program. And some of that same stuff, we're redesignating programs right now. I will say, to Courtney's reference to, and Crystal's about this in the med ed prep or registry style testing period, helping students, is that's a big thing that we're finding in our lower performing programs, is that they're simply offering test banks from the publisher, and the students just simply are not prepared. And we've been designing some remediation specifically for those underperforming instructors. But yes, we can help get a lot of that data, and that's what I had to clarify. If there's any questions, let me know.
So do y'all have it down to the student level, or just the cohorts as far as y'all can see, Richard?
We can see all the way down to the student and how an individual student performed. What we can, the only piece that we cannot see is what Scott referenced about the module topic. In the old days, a student got a report saying, and the program director got a report saying that Richard, was underpassing in cardiac and was above passing in trauma. They no longer get that. If they fail the exam, they simply get a numerical score that tells them where, what their overall value was. So, Scott referenced a 940 to pass. So if someone's failed with a 930, then they barely failed. If they're like a 650, they know, okay, we've got a lot of remediation to do with this person. We at the state do not see that. Only the program director can see the score for someone that failed, and the student themselves.
But I think I'm hearing you say that when anybody gets a report from National Registry, if they did pretty well on those things, but just completely flubbed on orthopedics, they don't know that.
Not anymore.
Do we know why they quit doing that? Did they just get so?
Yeah, yes, sir. It was a moving target. They did a good bit of research on it, and essentially what happens is that if Richard takes exam A, so one, it's proprietary of how many exams registry has at the EMT level and how many questions are in the overall test bank, right? But each individual exam that they have, they're adaptive, and each individual exam that they have has a certain number of questions in that bank. So then if a student takes that exam, the cardiac questions that they received in that exam may have been more difficult than the next exam that they saw. So what was happening is, as a student would go take an exam, they would get an above passing and just say everything except for cardiac, and then they would study cardiac. They'd go take the exam, and then they passed in cardiac, but they failed in trauma. So then they'd study for trauma, and it just became this repetitive cycle, and the student was chasing a moving target. And so they determined that the literature just wasn't there to support doing that. So they went away from that model because it was doing more to confuse students than to help them.
Okay.
So kind of back to my original topic. So if the state has access, does the state have access to the student level data that you're using to match up with these programs?
Yes.
All right, so if we require the program to sign a release so that the state would release that data to you, then it wouldn't require the program to do it or the instructor to do it. But that would give you the last piece of data that you needed to take this. I think that's a reasonable requirement. It's no work on the instructors, but an authorization form as part of a trauma commission funded class. Obviously, you got to participate in med-ed prep, but then also to allow the state to release the instructor data so that.
And I think that that's a great way to do it, that keeps the important component that this is not punitive. I don't want them to have to send their rosters with their pass rates and all of that stuff through GEMSA, through us. We don't want people to have to spread what might be unsuccessful candidates across the spectrum, right? But we do want to validate the data points inside the testing so that we can move them forward. And so I think that that's a great way to do it, is the state can communicate that. We can directly, connect that to the students on our end with what we're doing with the testing. And then nobody's data gets broadcast, because again, that's not the goal. The goal is just to move everybody forward.
And I like that concept better than putting it as a requirement because we don't sign an agreement with the instructor, agreements with the agency. So if you put the agency responsible for it and the instructor, they did terrible, I quit. Now they don't have access to that data anymore unless they were the program manager, and most directors are not. Most of the time it's the instructor that in our classes that I think follows that program manager.
So Richard, from your standpoint, what would y'all need in order to release this? Would it just be some type of authorization from the individual, from the instructor program? I just want to make sure we ever got an understanding of this.
Yeah, so it would need to come from the program, because what will like the authorized agent or the program director, because ultimately what's going to happen is when we designate an education program, say Richard's Most Excellent EMT Shop, when we designate that and registry gives that a site code, that's for all purposes a legal entity. So if that person left, if that instructor or program director left, the next person there would apply to our office and to National Registry to be appointed the program director for that entity, and then they would still remain having access to all previous data. So what you would want the agreement between the program, which would be the legal entity, and then it would always be available regardless of who the instructor was. In terms of us, what would have to happen for the data sharing request is we'd have to get a request from the Trauma Commission to share that specific data, and then we'd have to give it to our communications and legal team to give us the authorization to share that data. So they would definitely want to see some agreement from, say, program A, B, C, D, that you're requesting data for, they would want to see an agreement that that program had given you the express permission to view that data.
Sounds like a lot of work. I think we better get, I think we easier to get it from the instructor.
Yeah, well, what we will do, if it's all right for you guys, is let's let Crystal and Richard talk, and if we can work that out and put it on the agenda for the next trauma commission meeting, because that is the legal entity we're dealing with here. I think they would approve us asking for that data. We just need to get the details worked out.
Yeah, I think it might be reasonable to approve that we would be doing data collection on the back end, and we can work out what's the most functional and easiest way for our instructors and librarians to facilitate that.
Y'all good with that concept?
Yeah.
Because I think the more information we can get, the better we'll be able to help these programs succeed.
When you said approved, was you recommending like some action from this committee?
Yeah, just that if it's a concept that y'all wanna move forward with, if we can get approval on that, we'll work out what the logistics are. But just so long as the committee is committed to saying, hey, yeah, we do wanna do this data collection, and then Richard and I can figure out, does it need to go through DPH legal? Does it need to be an agreement with the instructor? We can kind of work those things out.
So I'll make a motion also.
He's not making anything because he thinks I'm restated anyway.
Yeah. I'll make a motion to proceed forward with the trauma commission staff and state office of EMS to find a path or an ability or enable the ability to connect National Registry pass rates with the classes that we're funding. Is that sufficient? Come on, Brian, you sitting there smiling.
He's waiting like you are.
Yeah. All right, so we got a motion and a second.
Who's seconded? Okay, good. Thank you, Dwayne. Any other discussion? Anybody against that concept, say nay. Hearing none, motion passes. Thank you, Terry. Anything else you'll discuss before we go into new business, with just the 26 budget? All right, can we put this on the screen now?
Yeah, it's up there. I have the other, so you want to reference the actual proposal.
And if anybody needs them, I got them.
And the ADLS looks different than the proposal. Tim and I have had several conversations. And those have been adjusted by remaining purchase orders being open, as well as we paid for the yearly maintenance with reallocated funds. So that's why that budget looks a little less than what you proposed. And then the installation reimbursement is in there for the 75 to the 25, the 26 budget.
Okay. Can you help me be clear, what's the difference between the 140 and the 61 on the ADLS equipment?
At that FY 25 was the 61. 26 is the 140.
Okay. I got you.
So at least where I'm thinking. Well, I don't know what I'm thinking about, FY 26, 4.9 million, is that the amount that we've got right now?
4.9 is your total budget, and then the remaining to allocate after these items above is the 4.2.
Okay.
So once we start plugging in, that 4.2 will diminish.
And just for clarification, FY 26 is the upcoming budget year, right?
Correct. We're in 25, we're wrapping up 25 now. 26 will start July 1.
Courtney, I would like to throw something out there, whenever the time's appropriate.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so as y'all know, I've served on this committee for many years, and in the early days, the goal has always been to help promote trauma care across the state. Some people say primarily rural areas, some people say all the state. I think it's beneficial for all the EMS providers in Georgia. With this program to give them the tools to help them better treat all of our patients. And obviously this is on the trauma side. So as we look at our budget every year, AVLS is pretty much set. The airtime, we have no control over. It is what it is. The equipment cost. The equipment grant that we do, I don't know about y'all, but in the folks in my region and some of the surrounding regions that I talk to, the providers love the equipment grant. To me, that falls into the preparedness bucket of all of our providers. One of the things I think that we're missing out on, you know, when AVLS first started, Tim, back in the early days when you were still at Georgia Tech,
Yeah.
AVLS was an unknown. Nobody was doing it across the country, and I believe Georgia's still the only state in the country that does this statewide. Is that
That's
correct?
correct.
So I think we need to continue looking down the road of what we can do with our providers across the state. I think we've done enough trials through various providers in Georgia for blood products in the field. And I wholeheartedly believe we need to continue looking for ways to improve patient care in the field. And I would like the consideration of setting aside a bucket of money to do grants to providers across the state that want to get into the blood product process with their services. And, you know, I know Crystal's got a lot of knowledge on this. We do have a lot of providers in Region 2 and some in Region 10 that are doing it and have been doing it for some time. And I think the process is becoming pretty fluid now for those that are wanting to get into it. Obviously, there's a significant cost to get into the process. And I would like to see, and maybe have a consideration of possibly putting $250,000 aside that we can do grants of up to, I don't know what that number is, maybe $10,000. That would be 25 grants throughout the year. To help services get into giving blood products in the field. So that's what I wanted to throw out there. And I'll be happy to answer any questions.
I'll comment on that. I think that it's needed. I think it's a great idea that we need to. What I was surprised about is at the coordinator and chair meeting that we talked about blood more than anything. Remember that? Or what? And probably almost all but 15 minutes of the meeting. And not one of these regions that proposed stuff had anything to do with blood. So I agree with that. My question is, are we past the proposal increase part?
Well,
This will be for the upcoming budget.
so the last meeting I had in mind was that, okay? But I agree with you. And I'll be honest with you, the last week or so, I've been thinking about the whole process. The target of what we do we save lives in trauma? And I think from what I read in the literature, and literature comes and goes, what's popular today might not be popular a year from now, I get that. But every study I've seen done is a strong correlation to survivability if we get blood transfusion. And for once in our lives, you and I are on the exact same track.
Going in the minutes, yeah.
We have a tendency to agree and disagree often, but I think he's right on. I think we got.
And I'm just throwing a number out there. I mean, we may say that we're gonna do $10,000 grants. And we're gonna put $250,000 in a bucket. And we may get 80 interest. We may get 10. I don't know what that number is gonna be. But I think it's a start. And then we can move from there, of either rolling it back or increasing it for the following year.
What you can also do with reallocation, but that's an option.
Right.
I think it's great that the issue, and I can tell you from one on, for us to get up and going, we've got the funding. It's about $12,000 to get started. That's carried on 2 different trucks. The issue we're having is I got a verbal agreement from Life South, because they see my provider, And then they just want me to send them the stuff on how we're gonna store it. And it's been weeks and I haven't heard nothing back. And I've called and it's like, so I think one thing we need to be in position to do, either from somewhere in the state or from this committee, is provide people as a liaison, you know, on, this is who your contact is for different blood banks. Cause trying to find a contact for a blood bank is really difficult.
Well, I think there needs to be a process in place. And again, I know Crystal has a lot of experience with this and Crystal, I'll be happy to work with you on this. I think we do need to come up with a best practices so when people apply for the grant, they understand what's required on their end. And then we can utilize best practices of what providers that are already doing it, the equipment that they're using, the processes. I know there needs to be an agreement with the medical director that they're gonna be involved in this process. You know, this isn't like putting IV fluids on the truck. It's totally different.
Yeah.
So I think all of that is something that we're not gonna be able to start tomorrow. But I think a lot of that's gonna have to come together and get this package together for providers that are interested in doing it. They understand what's involved to get into that program.
The state lays it out pretty clear on the steps they require, and but me, correct me if I'm wrong, I know in North Georgia, a lot of it's Northeast Georgia Medical Center that supplies the blood, so it's a lot easier than somebody down the South Metro or maybe over where you're at to be required to blow without going through a blood bank. And you know, you want to be able to do it with a blood bank that you can exchange with instead of, you know, having to solidify it, throw it away, or you're throwing away a lot of money every month. So, I mean, I think to me, as I mentioned in the chair and coordinator meeting, was, you know, we needed an ad hoc committee to be able to come up with this and address it. And
it's a conversation we've had with Liz as well, and I think that there's a plan for that in the summer for us to begin working with a small group on some consistent protocols, best practice.
Yeah.
And I think that this is an ideal project for your RTACs to be involved in. We would like to see consistent protocols across, you know, there might be some regional variation, but at least inside of our region, we've got indications, contraindications, and that's something that we found success with in the Region 10 project, is the blood bank at the hospital was like, we'll take one protocol, there's one set of equipment, we don't have to learn 5 different variables of what people are doing. And with that, they've got a contact with their RTAC coordinator for the oversight, and that alleviated a lot of fear of additional logistical burdens on the part of who is gonna provide the product. So, and those are conversations that RTACs are having. We've got a repository of these documents now where people are uploading the protocols that are being used in their regions, and so we can pull from that. But I do agree that we need to go a little bit further with a specific committee for the state to address it.
Yeah.
Scott.
And Scott, hey, one quick, I'm sorry, this is Jay online, and just for some feedback from the hospital perspective, as we see these policies becoming more and more kind of commonplace across people that do it successfully, hospitals are becoming much more kind of open to the ideas of supplying those blood products and having a good process to where we don't waste products. We're looking at moving to whole blood here at Henry soon, and then, you know, really starting to beef up the ideas of supporting those that are in our catchment area, you know, you, Clayton, Henry, et cetera, but potentially for those products, as they see the fear of the logistical nightmare that they perceived prior to these people going live and getting it right.
So I'm not speaking against it, but what I'm asking them is, if you started today, how long would it take you to be ready to pull the trigger?
Well, if I had the blood bank stuff right now, the agreement, then I could be up by July 1st.
But you
Well,
started,
not this point.
you
Yeah.
started several months ago.
I started months ago, yeah. I mean, a lot of it's research and looking at best practices, not just here in Georgia, but across the nation. I mean, I would say I probably got a year of research and investment, and then I've got.
But, okay, you did all that work, and I think at least one of the concepts is that you did all the work, you share that work, and the other guy doesn't have to do all that.
That's exactly right.
So that's a time saver and leads towards consistency across the state.
Training and everything, so it's like, I said it, I'll say it again, back up what you said. The number one thing that's saving people is blood, period.
Well, blood and transportation.
Yeah, well, I'm just saying, have a way to get there.
Because if they bleed to death in a rural hospital,
That's right.
they still dead.
Yeah, I agree. I'm just saying, that's the number one
Three
thing.
things that I think are important for us to consider is blood and transportation.
Yeah.
And training, they need to be able to be trained to do that.
Yeah, and that's
Where I
why
was headed-
now,
Where I was headed, we did the post licensure skills for handling an additional unit of blood. Which I won't go down my line about that, but so there's a different post licensure skill for initiation. It is a post licensure
Yes.
skill.
yes, sir.
And again, that would all be part of the application process for a service that says, yes, we're interested in doing this. We could have a process in place that says, this is where you need to start. You gotta do this, and this, and once you get all this done and ready, then we can provide you with a grant to help on the financial side.
What I'm getting at this, Huey, is initially, could we set up a one-day training to anybody who is interested statewide in utilizing this process? They can come and the Scotts of the world and the Chad Blacks of the world who've done this several places in time could explain, here's the pitfalls. I know
Yeah.
Lee and Metro and them are working through this as we speak, so they would bring some expertise, but one of the things I get at, when you get down to real rural South Georgia, and counties without a hospital whatsoever, then it's gonna be a little bit different process.
Right.
So I unanimously support the idea of funding startup cost, facilitating, coordination and information sharing. I think it really is the next thing that we really need to focus on is pre-hospital blood. I think that's a simple concept, but a good idea of, $250,000, $10,000 startup, and so we have the ability to facilitate that piece of it if that's a burden for a service. So I agree with that. I agree with everything.
And my thought is we would only do one grant per service. It's not
Yeah.
like if somebody runs
10
15
trucks,
ambulances
yeah.
and they want to put it on half their fleet, then that's gonna be on them. We can help them with a startup. And if they want to expand it internally, that's on them. But this is just to help services get into the process of giving blood, and whether that ends up on an ambulance or a supervisor vehicle, I don't know, that's up to them, that process. But anyway, that, just on that.
So what are we gonna do? You put a line on there for input blood products. Okay, and I'm not trying to.
Well, she's already got it.
I'm not trying to water down your.
I think what you had there is probably the bottom.
What I would like to be able to do is if we end up doing a one-day conference in place, being able to use that money to rent a space or provide a biscuit or something, I don't know. But to me, that would be a good start, and I know that there are some templates out there. Obviously, some folks are already doing it. But it would give an opportunity and that in advance for it, and then folks come ask questions, this works, this doesn't work.
And like I said, Crystal, I'll be more than happy to work with, if y'all want them. I'll be happy to work with whoever, I don't know if we need to put a small group together to do this, but either way, I'm willing to.
Yeah, I like the idea of like a template that can be provided to all the regions, and we know that there's gonna be regional variability to Courtney's points, can look a lot different in South Georgia, and we need to allow for that. But providing people the just kind of nuts and bolts of it, I think would be very helpful.
And it meets the state requirements, all that, but all those check boxes.
I think initially a small group to kind of hammer out some details. I'd like, there's a person with the Georgia Hospital Association that focuses on rural hospitals. I'd like them involved, simply because, and maybe even Nita Ham, because Nita has a real great relationship with, these rural hospitals. So I think at least for decades, the whole concept of giving blood is changing.
Right.
In the hospital, you had to have a special RN that hung the blood, and what we found, or what I believe is that in the old days, when they hung non-type blood and they killed a bunch of people, then they came up, you gotta have all of this. But it's much, much safer today because of the accountabilities, that if we do it, then the accountability has to be very easy.
Right.
That was the first time we give bad blood because it sit back hot, and that ends the program.
Yeah. And that's where the hospital blood banks and the blood banks are, that's where the difficulty lies
Yeah.
in working with this, is because their accountability to the FDA is some of the strictest
Yes.
within the hospitals that, working with them for many, many years, like even paying blood within the hospital, the times of the documentation and the things that they require that have to be reported back to the FDA and to the Blood Bank Association are some of the strictest. So that's where some of their leeriness, in letting it out the door, even though they see the importance of this. So that's where, they're not quick to respond on this, not because they don't want to, but it's a difficult task for them too. And I think working with those hospitals that are doing it successfully, and putting them together, it has to be part of that group, and where other hospitals have done it, how we can make it happen, because it is the big picture. Because what these hospitals are also seeing is the flip side of this, they're using less blood downstream when pre-hospital is giving it. So that's a win for them as well. So having that data, and one of the things we're collecting in the trauma registry, starting in 2025, is how much pre-hospital blood is being given. So I'm excited because some of that first data is beginning to come in the 1st of June. So I'm hoping at the end of the year for 2025, we're actually gonna have some decent statewide data for the services that are giving blood, what they're giving, and can start looking at that. So.
Well, we got a good avenue too, even with ABLS tracking, so that's big at this, and we have the vehicle now. Well, not now, we've had it for several years, but the ABLS system could very well tie into this to help with the tracking of blood and stuff like that.
Monitor the temperature and all.
Yeah.
You can use.
Courtney.
Yes.
Hey, this is Lee. Could Crystal or somebody work with, I suppose, Richard at the state level, and we get a map of everywhere that's got blood, and it'd be wonderful to have it for everybody that's in progress as well.
We asked,
Hi, this is Kelly. Yeah, sorry. We are working on getting a map of the state to designate where blood or blood products are being initiated in the field.
Thank you.
Courtney, this is Pete. If we're not able to increase our dollars, is there any particular bucket you'd like to reduce in order to pay for the blood products startup?
Say that again, Pete.
Are you talking about the budget on the screen?
Yeah,
Pete?
if we're not able to get an increase of 250 or 300,000, what would you want to cut in order to fund it? Because I support the program too, but reality is we may not have the dollars if we move everything over as is. So if we have to make any financial cuts, what would you want to cut to fund it?
Well, and that's a good point, but what I would like to be able to do is just put everything on board that we don't, and then we'll even start subtracting. Right. Well, I'm trying to look at this. Katie, help me with this. I mean, we got FY26 proposed, and on C22 is what that's saying above.
That's what the total above is.
Okay, but we haven't moved things over from 25 to the 26, except some of the stuff that we talked about.
Right, the only things we haven't moved, we won't do Bolger, we still have funds for that.
No, hold on, so we're not gonna go over?
We have funds for that.
Okay, all right, so that's pretty good there.
Basically, you're looking at education and equipment grant.
Yes. Since we did, unless we need any more med ed prep, we did AD with reallocated funds there. And then if you wanted to do the Metro Atlanta EMS conference again, we haven't received a proposal for that, but. The region threes. Okay, then it's covered in regions, covered in region 3.
Have they sent us any kind of proposal? Did they?
It's in, yeah.
That was, yeah, that was in Region Three's proposal through the RTAC.
Nothing separate.
So what would it look like?
So all of this, it was in Region Three's proposal from RTAC?
Correct.
So is it listed?
Yes,
Here
Yeah,
twice?
yeah.
30,000.
Okay, it's in that Region 3, so we don't have to move it across up above.
Right, so I'll put 0 there.
Okay.
And I have a question on the RTAX. So Region 9 currently did, when the needs assessment was asked for, Region 9 didn't have an RTAC, or?
We didn't have a chair, we didn't have a committee, but yeah.
So is Region 9 not entitled to funds for fiscal year 26?
So
Even if they were to come up with a.
by the deadline that he set the proposals, we hadn't, I think it would be something that I would love for the committee to consider in reallocation. Or if y'all wanted to do a carve out of a specific number for each region, that kind of throws back to our old regional improvement grant days. But I do agree that those who are up and coming need the support as much as anybody else does.
So what I'm questioning is, do we need to consider giving each region X amount of dollars? Or are we solely going based on their needs assessment?
Well, that's not solely based on needs assessment, that's based on what they asked for. That's the numbers there.
None of that's been approved yet, correct?
What?
None of that's been approved.
No, none of that's been
I
approved.
don't know why is it already on the?
Courtney asked for me to put it.
I asked,
So you're going to put what I was getting at is we don't have the updated budget for, that's not the correct 26 budget for GIMSA up there, and I'm not sure about that equipment grant. I think we either,
What's the updated gym stuff?
What's the, yeah, about that was the
well, what I have right here proposed 2026 is 1,894,498.50.
You want me to go ahead and add those on here?
yeah, go ahead and
Okay, I
add,
can add that.
let's add those things that have been
And that's
requested.
one, that goes up every
So if
year.
we
That's
know
one we gotta get under
Jim's
control.
numbers, let's put that in. Just like we did with the RTAs.
Yeah, but I mean,
You know,
we
Well,
can
you
cancel
can
everything we
take it. I'm
do,
not
but
sure how we
education,
should
we can just flood the state with training if that's. the
Courtney?
direction that
Yes.
we're limited.
Hey, this is Alan from Region 8. I know we haven't assigned an RTAC to our region yet, but I don't want us to be excluded from that also on that funding. So I agree that I think they should be a set funding for the RTACs, not just what they proposed, because we don't have anything in there representing Region 8 at the moment.
so I guess I'm not trying to make you mad. So you try to get up and going. Will you get up and going and be able to spend money within the year?
Well, I mean, if we had money to spend, I'm sure we would, but I mean, not having anything in there and excluding us because we don't have anyone in there as a RTAC, to me is not a good thing. We've had interviews, and what we're waiting on now is the assignment of who got that position.
And so the court, I think financial support for the RTACs are gonna help you develop those that are underdeveloped right now. And I know that's a cart before the horse thing, but giving people something that's drawing them into the RTACs, if we're having, you know, Brian, if we had equipment that could be checked out by the regions, if we had courses that were gonna be done by the RTACs, I think that that's putting people in the room and giving them, what the carrots to be there.
Or you can also make the point, throw money out. And see who grabs it.
Do they have the
So
classes?
I'm a little frustrated with that. Because to put the word out, if you want to let them come up with a project. So some did, some didn't, and I get that, and we did that. I'm in Region 6, so, the other piece of my puzzle, and y'all excuse me for being the way I am, but are we trying to reinvent the training group from the State Office of EMS of days past? Because in days past, I could go to Augusta Bar Training and quit from the region. So we instituted that. And I'm not sure that. I still think that that ought to come from another bucket.
Corey, what about another question that I brought up to you about the region, the RTAC report and asking for, you know, permission to seek for this grant stuff through the region councils, which is obvious that it was surpassed and they follow that path from the.
What now?
In many other regions, it didn't, the RTAC, it should, all of them report to the region council.
Mm-hmm.
And from my discussions with several, including mine, that's why I'm gonna vote against mine. Because they didn't go through the right channels. We had, you know, you calling people, asking them they need to put in proposals. We had you telling everybody that they need to put in for $25,000 to $30,000. And to me, that's a conflict. And it circumvented the region council before they even had the opportunity to vote in meetings. I'm not saying about yours, Scott.
Cause that was all done through
Yeah,
mine.
but I assure you that it wasn't done in many others.
Right.
Yeah, I've had conversations with 3 different regions.
And ours, region
They
10,
were frustrated.
excuse me, was done through the RTAC. It was actually through the Directors Association and RTAC.
Well, there was discussion, but that was never discussed, what you said here.
What's that?
That the director's funds was gonna push our funding mechanism, then that was never discussed in your region council.
Not in the council, but at our Directors Association meeting
different.
and at
The
our.
way the RTACs were set up, they report to region council, not to the director.
Correct, but our RTACs did discuss it, but it was not discussed in the council
It
meeting.
was discussed in the council meeting and it was reflected in the minutes. We did not ask for a vote in that. Because on that day, in that region, those are back to back to back to back meetings. And it was discussed at length in the Directors Association meeting and then the following RTAC meeting, and then was reported out the conversation from the 2 previous meetings.
Was that after the proposals were sent in?
No.
Was that
it's
the
not.
follow-up meeting that you had?
Well, the conversations I had with some folks, in fact, is one of them, President of Directors Association, because they said the Directors Association is gonna have the funding. Because that's been one of my questions and remains one of my questions, how do we fund them? Scott and them have got a 501c3, so they're pretty much in like Flint. Some of the rest of them, when you get right down to it, they're not legal entities. We can't fund them, and even if we could fund them, where would they keep the funds? How would they pay the instructors and then get reimbursement? So there's still some issues out there that we're gonna need to resolve to make sure that this is done appropriately. And I'm not against funding the RTACs, don't get me wrong, but and Alan, I'm sorry, I'm not interested in funding a project that doesn't exist yet. I don't know how to put it any other way than that. But.
You're not
but-
about it. I just didn't want to miss out on anything because we didn't have anyone in place at that time because ours resigned. So I'm good with that. I represent Region 8 and I didn't want them to think that I wasn't going up and standing up for what our region needed when you had the other regions that were requesting money also, was my thing.
Yeah, I think that's a great point.
That's how they roll.
And so, don't let me put words in your mouth, Brian, but it sounds like, would it be a possibility then to earmark a set dollar amount for each region, and then if that region brings forward a proposal, because like in ours, there's no conflict, you know, and I understand, you know, what Scott and others are saying, but, you know, you can't apply that to every region as well. And then I think to Brian's point, and maybe even Alan's point, they didn't have an RTAC coordinator there. So if we just set money aside, and then if they come forward with a project during this upcoming fiscal year.
Yeah, I mean, it's a twofold question.
Then each region still has an opportunity for, we just set an amount of money aside. So if they don't come forward with a project, or the project's not reasonable, it goes through a vote in this committee still. But we just earmark money for each region, and if a region chooses not to use it, then they just don't use it. Or if they bring a proposal forward that is rejected by this committee, it still goes through the same process as before.
But to be the devil's advocate, if I, as an entity, have an idea of something we want to do in our region, I'm gonna come to you and say, we would like to get this dollar amount to do this project. But if we as an entity say we're gonna put $25,000 aside for every region, then that means now, instead of me coming up with a project that I wanna do in my region, now I'm gonna say, I got $25,000, I need to figure out how I'm gonna spend it. You see what I'm saying?
No, I agree with that. But I think, here's my point on this, and I just think that as a subcommittee, there's no plan. It's like we're flying by our seat on this stuff. I think if we're gonna fund our tax, then I think we need to take this next fiscal year and develop a mechanism for that to happen. So everybody's doing it the same way, and people have an opportunity to come or connect with a 501c3, so that we don't have, I was blindsided. Be honest with you, I'm a subcommittee member on this, I'm an RTAC chair, and I'm the representative of our region council. And I knew nothing about these proposals until phone calls started getting made, and I got called, I got it sent, when y'all sent it out the email. So that's a problem. That's
I
a
think
communication problem.
I think initially there were 3 grants that were requested. Is that right?
Last year.
That's up there now, but originally I think there was 3 that were originally brought forward to this group.
Yeah.
And it was like Region 10 and there was 2 others. I can't remember who the other 2 were.
My memory says that those were the 3 that were voted on last year and
Yes.
declined, and everybody who has a number listed up there submitted a request.
Okay.
Those were equipment grants, not this.
No.
No, there was
those-
3 requests last year that we denied our tax, that were making requests just like these right here.
Yeah. Okay, well, I think we need to develop a mechanism for this to happen, today we're here to vote on proposals, and proposals that were done differently throughout the state.
Well, so disregard my statement on funding each RTAC equally. My concern still remains that now that we have a functioning RTAC in Region 9, if they were to come up with an education needs assessment and we identify a need that we need in fiscal year 26, is there a mechanism that we can fund that?
Not on that, but
That's my question.
not on
Or
that.
will we have to wait till fiscal year 27?
Yeah, as it stands up there right now, that's exactly right. Now, we could, I mean, several of the RTACs have given very good succinct proposals, I think. We could put all of those dollars and maybe some more into one bucket. And then come back and say, okay, it's a competitive grant, tell us what you're gonna do. And Crystal does a great job in Region 5, they get it out of the park. I've made some use of some of their stuff. I think and I know Region 2 does go, Region 1 has a good program. I will tell you this, I get some comments, they did this here, they didn't do it at my house. I get that from the gyms classes, I get that from the RTAC stuff. The EMS community tends to whine about, if you don't do it exactly like I want it, exactly when I want it, then I'm unhappy. So I'm right at the moment looking at that's on the board. So unless someone makes the change and we will have to approve that. And Scott's point well taken. I am a little more than a little concerned because I talked to one guy the other day and had put oil in the ear afterwards. And he's the council chair who didn't know anything about it. And I think Crystal probably had to put a little oil in her ear too, because I think she got some of that same thing. But I'm frustrated that there's not better lines of communications for the EMS world period, not just this, but our tax were set up by the commission and we did some huge negotiations over all that, but it was determined that we weren't gonna set up a whole new entity in each region, that we already had an entity that had a legal presence and some footprint, and that we would utilize the regional council to help run these programs. So, does anybody want to make a motion about any of this?
So I'll make a motion and y'all help me with the funding amount, that we set aside funding that's available to the regional RTACs. So I need an amount to put into motion.
Well, you got 173 there now. I didn't see you had already totaled it up until I was sitting here doing it in my head. You put the total at the top, not at the bottom.
What if we rounded it up to 200 and gave everybody 20K? If they give us a proposal for the 20K.
I'm reasonable with that, and I'm waiting on some, I don't wanna put a dollar figure in here and somebody say that's too much or that's not enough.
Well, so the regions that do have functioning RTACs that do what they're supposed to do, I feel like to that extent, you're punishing them. Because they've done their homework. They have a functioning RTAC.
Yes. But the other point is that if they're Allen and they're trying to get their feet on the ground, it gives them some traction. So
How many more? I see that there's 3 regions that did not have a request.
That's 6,
6, 8, 9, yes.
And are so all 3 of them now saying that they do have a request?
And so I do believe that we'll probably have a request that comes out of, Region 9 to support the efforts that they want to do. Their first meeting is coming up not until next month, so. And then same with Region 8, there's reorganization happening in that region, and I know that would be the same, and we have to discuss it with Region 6.
So Crystal, based on the proposals that we got both last year as well as the year before, what would be a fair starting point?
No, I think if the committee would set aside $20,000 for every region, I think that's a phenomenal start. I think that they need to, just like everybody else, I would want them to come in and talk to this committee every year with what they were able to accomplish with $20,000. I think if you looked at the proposals, the things that they were talking about supporting, the amount of fiscal responsibility and the riskiness of our RTACs. I mean, look at what Crystal Smith is able to do down there, right, with the funding that they receive. I think that this is a great mechanism to speak to something, a structure that's already inside the regions, to work with our directors associations and our RIMSACs. Do I think that $20,000 meets all the needs? I don't. But I think that it will be a really great starting point, but I would want them to validate exactly what they're doing and how they're benefiting their regions annually if they were to have a follow-up request.
I think there'll be some regions that won't have the ability to spend $20,000. What's gonna happen when it's not spent?
Let me ask this real quick. A simple solution. If it's a bad idea, I'm okay with it being a bad idea and I'll hush it. We've already got 173,000 up there that's been requested.
Yeah.
And these are from the RTACs that are structured. They went through the process and identified what they needed granted.
not all of it.
Well, hang on. We're talking about floating the idea of $200,000. What if we go with the 200,000 mark, go ahead and award what's been requested and planned and followed, so those people aren't penalized. And we still have $27,000 for the 3 remaining RTACs. If they come up with requests with their structure of things that they would like to do. Is that feasible or not?
No.
No?
This is
Well,
Jeff. We keep throwing more money into that pot, but we're not saying where that money's gonna come from. Somebody's gonna have to lose out on either equipment grant or EMS education. I think with the blood product, I think it's a great idea. But I think it needs to be planned and figured out, some work done ahead of time before we start throwing that money out and making grant money available to people. I mean, Region 2, Region 10, Grady, Metro Atlanta, they're all people who've got skin in the game and they've proven it works. We need to have some planning moving ahead with this, so we're not just setting out $250,000 and then cutting it out of equipment grants or EMS training. What do
I
I
agree.
think?
There's a few areas in EMS training that I'll bring up in a little bit where I think maybe we can save some money. So,
Well,
Well,
I make a motion.
let's get on it because we keep adding and we're not taking back.
yeah,
All right, so I've still got a motion on the floor. I was just trying to finalize the dollar amount. So can I finish my original motion?
Sure.
All right, so I make a motion that we earmark or set aside $20,000 for each region to apply for regional RTAC grant.
So,
That's the 200,000 that you mentioned.
so the question that I would have, first of all, do we have a second?
Second.
All right, we got a second. So the question I would have, your motion sets aside $20,000 per region, right?
Yes.
Okay, so if region 5, which amount is greater than, all right, can only get 20,000.
And so I change it to 200,000, and if all 10 regions put in for it, we'll divvy it out equally, but if some regions don't, and one region's got a $30,000 request, then we'll fund the $30,000 request. $200,000 earmarked to allow the region RTACs to start. Finish what we've attempted in two budget cycles.
Okay, so let's just, on your motion, I'm thinking towards Scott's issue, I think, I'm different than him. So who applies for the grant? Who signs off on it? Do you understand the question?
You're asking what entity is gonna be responsible within the region?
Yep.
I think
Because
that's part of the,
From what I'm getting from Scott, his RTAC coordinator requested this money and nobody else really was
That's
involved.
correct.
Am I saying that right?
That's correct.
I'm sorry.
Can it go back to the council?
That's, I'm asking that question. That's the way it was set up to be.
That way, everybody, hey, where did that come from?
in our case, our RTAC and our Directors Association met and came up with the request and then came to me with it and asked me to bring it here, since I represent Region 10. That's how it was done in our case.
But in my mind, that's wrong.
Okay.
That y'all should have taken it back to council. And that was the way it was set up initially with trauma commission.
Okay.
So
And I think a lot of the people just didn't know. I mean, I didn't know if you knew that's the way things were supposed to channel and all, but that's the way that the whole thing was set up initially.
I mean, it was mentioned in our council meeting that the request was gonna be made, but it was not voted on in our council.
I think that, to speak to your point, I think that there's some confusion about who, what, when,
Yeah.
where, and how that works.
I think that your intent was great. I'm not saying, I think your intent was good. I think that all y'all's intent is asking for funding is good. And I think the problem is that there were several regions who didn't even know until the last minute or the coordinators didn't even know until the last minute. And fortunate but unfortunate, many of the coordinators work in the hospital-based system. They're not really familiar with the way that the EMS RIMSACs work. They get a call from somebody, especially if they're a paid member of the trauma commission, as a coordinator, that, hey, we've got this money available, we need to know what you wanna know. Then they're thinking, okay, I need to call a few people, what do we need? But it's not the right people that didn't follow the right path. If we wanna vote on his motion, then I'll pose a motion.
I'm gonna have to think about it, restate it.
I have a question though, if we put a bucket of money upfront and we don't earmark specific amounts to each region, you're gonna have the region 5s come in and, ask for the 40, and then that leaves less for the other regions. I think it might be, that's just mine. How would we be fair? Yeah, be fair across all regions at that point, if we don't set a certain amount aside for each region.
Like I said, my concern is,
I'm indifferent on that, honestly.
my concern is I don't wanna punish the RTAC who are actually out there doing what they're supposed to be doing.
Well, I get that, but also go back to it. I think I was fairly clear to the world that the last meeting was, this is when you're supposed to bring your projects. And those are the ones who did it.
And it goes all the way back to last year. We had this conversation when the three, so to hear you say that, I get that specifically didn't know the ask. But last year, and whenever it was, whatever meeting, when those three regions asked for buckets of money, then we had this conversation then and how, what this was gonna look like and what needed to occur for this fiscal year. So we just keep kicking the can down the road, and the ones like Brian is talking about that are doing what they're and following these paths. So we're gonna punish them and we're not gonna move forward and hold back. It just doesn't make a lot of sense.
Let me give you an analogy of that.
All right.
We all want to give blood.
Okay.
Okay, I'll go back, hell with it, I'm gonna do some blood. There's supposed to be things that happen. I go get blood, put it in my truck, so I administer blood. Did I save a patient? Did I help them? Absolutely. Am I in trouble? Absolutely. I'm trying to make sure that everything's being done the way that legislature has originally set up the trauma commission and what we did with the RTAC before my time, but I did my research. That's the way it was set up. And it wasn't done that way. I'm trying to say we need to build a mechanism so everybody's doing it the right way. And you know, you did it the right way. I'm not doubting you, but there's many that didn't. And as Huey did, he thought he was doing the right thing by the way he did it, but it wasn't the right way, the way that it was set up.
But my question, Courtney, is you said what I told you was wrong. You said it should have come from the council. Who at the council should have made the request?
RTAC should have made a proposal to council, and this is what we want to do.
Like I said, it was
Because-
discussed in council, but it wasn't voted on.
Well, RTAC is a sub.
But I'm talking about who comes to this group to ask for the money.
I don't care.
Well, I thought that
As
that
long-
was what my
as long as somebody
responsibility
signed off on
was
it,
as a
the
representative of the council.
And what I want the entire council to come. All I need is for it to be in the minutes or signed off on that the council approved this action.
Okay.
And whether that the RTAC person brings that and says, hey, on such and such a date, we discussed these things and this is what we want to do.
Right.
Right on the proposal, it could have the date that it was, voted on.
Well, I mean, it'll be in the minutes, but again, it was discussed in the council. It wasn't voted on by the council.
And that is a problem throughout the state. We discuss things and we don't go through the formal process. And I get that.
I didn't know it needed to be.
And I think that that's the confusion too, is we didn't know that it needed to be, and a quarterly meeting cadence doesn't allow RTACs to be really that responsive across the state. The reason why we have coordinators in position is because I could not wait. I can't have a question for these coordinators or an action I need them to take, and then me wait until their next regional council meeting.
Right.
That would defeat the purpose of having a coordinator. I need coordinators so that they can respond quickly when things come up across the region. And I think that if there's a better process y'all would like for us to navigate, I think everybody's open to that. The idea is system improvement. What we're doing right now in this room is improving the system. That's the goal. And I just want everybody to stay on the same page with that. Is that if you feel like the coordinator slighted you by not following the procedure, I can guarantee it was not intentional. A $2,000 request was solely to support a conference in your region. It was not. So do I recognize there's room for improvement? Absolutely. Y'all tell me how you want me to improve the process. I'll communicate that effectively with the coordinators, but a quarterly cadence doesn't work for responsiveness.
Yeah.
So I need that to be in the thought process of how we navigate this moving forward.
Well, one thing, Crystal, is first of all, I stated getting attention was right, okay? Your position was created after several RTACs were already created. There wasn't an RTAC coordinator for many years. Correct me if I'm wrong, people, because I've only known this for many years. Brian,
Say what now?
when there wasn't.
There was a system, it was empty for a little.
Okay.
But yes, but
Yeah.
there was a systems, an RTAC.
I mean, the trauma commission coordinator, your position.
Yes, it was vacant. It was vacant.
So I think that, look, we need to make sure that it's done the right way, the way the legislature, the way the trauma commission meant for this to be set up. I hate to say, I still believe that those other proposals, or maybe we have proposals also during the equipment committee stuff selection last year. That's when those proposals were. Cause somebody wanted to buy, I know that they wanted several things for the pediatric stuff down in Region 5. And I think somebody was wanting an ATV.
Somebody wanted an app.
An app, yeah.
That was, yeah, they asked for an app. Crystal was trying to do her stuff with the pediatric, symposium that she does.
And the equipment.
And I
So,
don't remember the third.
so this, I'm gonna call time. Okay, I'm gonna get me one instructions. Terry, tell me your motion again.
Alright, so the motion is that we set aside $20,000 per region available for the RTACs to apply to this group for funding. I think we can still accomplish what y'all feel like needs to be accomplished, Scott, because we're talking about in the future. There's still time for your RTAC, your regional council to formalize the process, but it gives them the ability to do that. So we're talking about a future budget year, not the current budget year. So there's more than 12 months here for whatever processes need to happen to be done. Positions are
That
filled.
was your motion?
No, I guess I got into my comment that I was fixing to make. The motion is to earmark, set aside $200,000, 20,000 per region for the RTACs to apply for funding for this upcoming fiscal year.
Let me make a question. Because it's, look, we're saying $200,000, $20,000 per region. That's what you're saying.
200,000 total,
Okay.
subdivided to Katie's point, to 20,000 eligible for each region.
So that's.
That was what you, simplification you were looking
I
for,
was just
Katie, right?
thinking, fund the 200,000, how would we go about that if we had several? And say Region 5 submitted theirs first and then walk that, you see what I'm saying? I think we've got to have some type of.
Yeah, and I would be okay, because ours was more than 20. I'd be okay if we were limited to 20 by this.
And then once reallocation happens, you can go in and true up who needs to be trued up to cover their proposals if, say, a region did not apply.
Yeah.
So. Any questions?
Isn't, and when we,
Are we in the discussion phase? I didn't hear it seconded.
the EMS, you look at EMSC.
Yeah.
They're a subcommittee underneath the council.
Yeah.
How are they funded?
Damn if I know, up here. They're not-
But it's still, but it's still the same.
No, it's not. They're not funded to us. I
No, not us, but it's still the same concept of what we're talking about with the council. I want Scott to feel warm and fuzzy about this, and he doesn't.
I don't think you're gonna get.
Well, I know they not, and I understand his point, but it's the. It was there. This is not the first time we've talked about this, and I guess that's my frustration, and we've talked about this, and I don't know what goes on. I've never said in one of Region 4's meetings. I don't know what that looks like. But what I hear is sitting here representing Region 1 and the people that are in Region 1, we're fixing to get what I see dinged because whatever communication problems are there in Region 4 and whatever region. And that's not okay with that.
Any other questions?
Hey, Courtney? Courtney?
Lee? Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Hey, I guess we're in the discussion phase. I didn't hear it seconded. So my question is, the RTACs, I think they're doing good work. They're growing, but EMS is just now going to carve out $200,000 from the EMS 20% to pay for all the RTAC activities. Why is this not coming directly off the top budget from the Trauma Commission?
That's a relatively good question.
These
I don't have a
proposals
good
are
answer.
specific to EMS education and the needs assessment that was done for EMS. These proposals specifically, but we would entertain money off the top to support the tax.
Were you able to hear Crystal?
I mean, if it's, I did, I think, But if we're talking about doing this, is this just a one-time deal or is this a $200,000 ongoing every year? I mean, that starts to sound like we're just gonna give you $200,000 from the EMS budget.
I feel comfortable every year we're gonna have requests.
Yeah, so I think we're setting a precedence that the EMS budget is gonna take a $200,000 hit before we even start budgeting. That's my comment.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah, hey, this is Jay.
Alright.
Quick question from the RTAC perspective and those that are mentioned that work in hospitals that might not know what's going on. The question is, would there be a systemized statewide process set up for how you allocate this money within each RTAC, or will we now open it up for each RTAC to do it how they want to? For example, in Region 4, we have very limited participation in RTAC. We average 5 to 6 members of the pre-hospital world that attend the meeting. So getting input sometimes is a little more difficult than maybe would be perceived. So would there be some strings attached to participation A? And then would there be a consistent system across the state to set up for disbursements of those monies if given to each region equally?
I can't answer that. I don't know.
My personal thought is, I always thought all along, and I've been hearing for years about we have a great RTAC over here, we have an RTAC down here that doesn't even exist. Over here, we got an RTAC that wants to exist, but they don't have anybody to run it. My thought process is, this is the kind of stuff that makes RTACs get involved and get their act together. You want to get your hand on some grant money, get your shit together, show up to the damn meetings. You know, you say you only got 4 providers out of a region that's got 15 providers. I don't know what the number is. If people truly want to get involved and make a difference in their regions, they need to get involved.
Okay.
You know, I mean, I understand that, but I'm just saying our hospitals need to be involved, our EMS providers need to be involved in that.
I don't like what he's saying, to be honest with you. I kind of like what he's saying, to be honest with you.
Like it either, but so
It's a little true.
So here we have spent a lot of time on this, and we spent as much as there's obviously a lot of differences of opinion here.
Right.
So
and nobody's saying one's more right than the other. I agree a lot with what Scott is saying. I understand his position. I don't know what the answer is, but
the answer is we fixed the vote on Terry's motion.
Where are we at if you plug in all those numbers as they're there as far as?
Right at the moment.
Well, I've got it.
What is it?
Not everybody seeing that.
300,000.
Just like it is there, just like it's written, what is the numbers?
All right, time out. I can't listen but 1 or 12 people at a time. If we put all those numbers on the right-hand column for 26, what kind of money do we?
20,000 for each is what you're saying.
20,000, yeah.
Great.
Put all of it over there approved. Where are we at? We might be fighting over nothing. We got extra money or something.
Well, that was small.
But I still got some things I want to stick in there.
So we still have remaining to allocate with everything on your right hand column. $2,048,605.
That
includes the equipment,
that includes the current.
That's without the equipment.
That's not the.
Equipment grant we always did.
Do it at the end, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Right.
So the bottom line is if we do this, we're taking it away from the equipment grant. Anything else we do, we're taking away from the equipment grant. Is that correct? Okay.
Well, there's
equipment grant.
$2,048,000 left to put towards the equipment grant right now. If you just
Yes.
did that. And last year we did 1.6 million.
Yes.
So 400, almost $500,000 getting funded the equipment grant, the exact same.
Yep. So we can vote on Terry's motion. Now, I'm gonna say this about the motion. There's a way I'm understanding the motion. He says $200,000, $20,000 per region. So if Region 6 doesn't come up, request money, then we're gonna have more money to spend and that's just the way that motion reads. Okay, is that where you want it to be?
Money to spend where? You said if Region 6 doesn't apply for it, there's more money to spend.
There's $20,000 that you have assigned to Region 6 that they didn't spend. So we can go back
And
If we
reallocate.
go back in January and reallocate it, give January to come up with a plan, and then we give it region.
Oh, they'll come up with a plan.
Is that right?
If they know they got 20,000.
It remains in the RTAC education funding bucket for reallocation.
To be reallocated anywhere we want it. Courtney's new swimming pool, I don't care. So I'm gonna restate the motion. I'm gonna vote. Terry's motion is to put $20,000 into the RTAC education fund, $20,000 per region. Did I say it right?
Yes.
All right, all in favor, and I wanna know who's doing this, because I think there might be some differences. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right.
All opposed, same sign.
No,
Hey,
no.
Okay. Well, we're gonna do a roll call though. I'm gonna ask Gabby to go down the list of those present and vote yes to do it, and no to not. Y'all realize I'm 4 speakers into this meeting. My blood sugar's probably 700.
Alright, Courtney,
I don't vote till the end.
you wanna listen? Okay, Lee Oliver,
No,
Scott Stevens,
Yes.
Jeff Adams,
no,
Pete Quinones,
No.
Scott Roberts,
No.
John Smith is absent. Dwayne Montgomery,
No.
Alan Owens,
No.
Brian Hendricks,
Yes.
Huey Atkins,
No.
Terry Cobb,
Yes.
and then Dr. Smith is absent.
30 yeses, 7 noes.
Okay, motion fails. So I would entertain the motion to do something else.
I'll make a motion to fund the RTAX as they have requested of what was originally put in.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Have a second. Any discussion?
what is the total cost on that? I'm sorry.
$163.
$173 and some change.
160.
Okay, just asking one more time, why, somebody brought it up earlier, why are we funding this off the EMS budget? Because it's all EMS stuff? Is that the answer?
It's designed to be EMS education.
It's based off of the RTAX needs assessment that was done.
Okay.
A lot of it's equipment though.
All right, any other questions? And we'll do this the same way, Gabby, if you will. All in favor of the motion, I'll restate the motion. The motion is that we would fund the RTAX as they have requested it, and that is on the current request list. All in favor is aye. No, excuse me, Gabby, I'm sorry. Gabby will run down the list with us.
Lee Oliver,
Yes.
Scott Stevens,
Yes.
Jeff Adams,
yes,
Pete Quinones,
Yes.
Scott Roberts,
No.
John Smith is not here, Dwayne Montgomery,
Yes.
Alan Owen,
No.
Brian Hendricks,
Yes.
Huey Atkins,
Yes.
Terry Cobb,
Yes.
Dr. Smith is not here, and Courtney.
I would, yes. They met by just
All right, yeah,
waiting.
9-2.
All right, that motion passes. All right. So now, if we're looking up here, I would like that 30,000 in EMS license education that we paid some of that up front. Is that the mini prep? Would you put it mini prep so I can understand? So I know we pre-funded some of that, Crystal. Do we need 30,000 still?
Yeah, so I think, I sent you some options on the way that we can evolve our use of that program. One of the things that Fort Meade asked for was like that expanded instructor package. And so there's gonna be an option for us to include clinical tracking for the programs and skills tracking. The SMCs that can be built into the platform. So that is a higher cost per student and per student. And then we also have an option to do post-course testing for continuing education offers. So I think if y'all would like to expand our use of that program, I think that we could consider putting additional funding in it. I think if you'd like to continue the program as we did in the last fiscal year, then what was reallocated should cover our students for the next program.
So if we don't enhance it, then we're good.
Then we should have adequate funding. You know, ideally, we fill every single EMT class that y'all approve, and I have to come back and ask for some more, but I think 80,000 really gets us a lot of that.
So let me stick my idea in right at the moment. And I've looked at the stuff that Crystal gave us in there, and I think it's pretty good, and I think it will help. But right at the moment, we still got a good bit of confusion over the mini prep with some of this stuff about what it is and what it's not. So at least for right at the moment, I'd rather not put anything else in that bucket until we get everybody in alignment there. That makes sense.
Yes, sir.
So, but what I do want to do is have at least two groups that we will fund to help work on that toolkit, so that my goal is, and Crystal was quick the other day to help me understand, if you got a lesson plan and a curriculum, that has to vary depending on whether you're teaching 2-hour blocks, 4-hour blocks, 8-hour blocks. And what I'm hoping we might be able to do is chop it all into 4-hour blocks, give them 4-hour blocks. And if the curriculum chart calls for 16 hours and they have 4 blocks, that they would cut and paste and put into that. I don't know. I just know that new instructors have a lot of problems because they're new. It's not because they're not smart. They know their skills, know their profession, and just getting it across is difficult. So what I would like for us to do is set up 2 different study committees, or 2 different development committees is what I'd rather call them, to develop that toolkit using the Scots and others like him who have good success rates and low attrition rates, to find out how they do it and bring some of those folks into the same meeting that don't have those. You know, they have poor pass rates, and high attrition rates. But anyway, get a group together that can be somewhat cohesive to help us develop a packet to help instructors succeed. And I'm just pulling a number out of the hat, $30,000. I think that would fund a couple of meetings and maybe somebody to do some of the legwork. Crystal, is that an unusual? Are you way off or way under, way over?
Yeah, well, I think that, meeting costs would be a consideration if we're gonna get those groups together, I think, but there are a lot of educational working groups across the state that exist now that we can tap for that. So I don't know what it would cost to hire a contractor to develop this for you. That's something that I'd need a little bit more time to research. But I think in addition to people you might want to name from this group, I think there's also the EMS Education Consortium, that we could continue to partner with.
As long as they were high performers, I'm happy.
Yeah, and there's a representative from
Not all
each
of them
region.
are.
Yeah,
So,
right.
is
So
that-
I can look into what concrete costs, and I don't have that for you today.
So put $30,000 in it. And we may not get to it this year, but we will get closer. Is that?
How it means for success, is that?
What it means for success is that we would have a book, if you will. We would have a toolkit for any of them that would help them succeed, so that we won't be funding courses with 20% pass. That's what I'm trying to get away from.
Is that 30,000?
I think, and I want another 30,000 just to look at that concept of what can we do, should we do to train new instructors?
Would that go in the same bucket?
We can just put $60,000 in educational improvement. That gives us some flexibility. Does anybody want to make a motion to make me feel better? For that educational improvement concept?
What was the second part of it you said?
Second part is to try to develop a curriculum for educating new instructors. But at the moment, we take them to somewhere and teach them for a week, and then we turn them out on the world. My concept would be that that's something not unlike a leadership program, so that you teach it for a week, then the next quarter you come back and do something else. I don't know that we need to do that. I just would like for a group to look at it. Anybody want to make a motion?
My only question I have is, I'm not sure what the funds for. I mean, we have meetings all the time and there's no money in it. We have meetings and committees all the time, and there's not really money other than maybe lunch or something, you know? So, I mean, I'm fine with allocating that money, but I just want to say it might be reallocated at the end of the budget, some of it. But I think it's good to have some funding for that. I'll make a motion for it.
All right, thank you, sir.
Yeah, second.
All right, got a motion and a second. So, and I would hope, I would certainly hope that we could leverage some of those things that are going on now. Cause I recognize consortium is a strong backbone in that, you know, we might leverage the consortium plus you to do that. But I'm just, it bothers me, the success rate, particularly of new instructors. Richard's comment, well taken, that these pop-up classes are difficult when you look at the pass rates. But also, that conversation yesterday with the guy from Johnson County, he's like a Manning County and Lawrence County. If they weren't doing the classes themselves, they're probably out of business. But any other questions about motion?
Courtney, can you
Motion is
restate
good.
it, please?
And the motion is put $60,000 in a bucket for educational improvement. Any other question?
Lee, somebody had the educational instructor improvement.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
That's a good term to add, yeah. All in favor, aye. Any opposition? Thank you all. Now, getting back to this. Is there anything else that we need to talk about?
I have one item.
Okay,
So under EMS education,
yes,
the proposed budget is for burn classes.
yes.
And I know Grady and Augusta have to do outreach. And they have communicated that they will do burn classes at no cost. And we've had conversations about where's all the money coming from to pay for this stuff. I would recommend that we cut that from the education budget because those opportunities are out there. Grady's catchment area is statewide.
No, it's not necessarily.
That's how they are marketed, is their catchment area is the state of
Well, I
Georgia.
can show you the these over 10 tapes. Go ahead.
Let me do this.
Okay,
Right now, we're voting on that total budget,
right,
okay? And the next meeting, we'll try to piecemeal all of this stuff out.
okay.
I have talked to people who say Grady's statewide, but I've also talked to people who said, well, that's what our marketing thing says, but no, we're not gonna go to Hire, Georgia. I do know that they're reaching out, that's a huge question.
Right.
But you're right, Grady's got a burn center that by their verification from ACS, they're supposed to do outreach as is doctors.
Right.
So I think we need to try to leverage those things. I also think we need to do a little bit of work, although I think Grady helped develop, I think it's a 6-hour curriculum. I just would like to make sure that curriculum has been appropriately vetted. I think it has, but I don't know that.
Yeah, and I'm embedded by under what? You know, what are we vetting?
Yeah.
It would be my question, but again, that's $200,000 in something that we're being told they will come and do it, that education at no cost.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm bringing that up. That's
Yeah.
200 grand.
I think
That's for that.
Just real quick, kind of like you saw did you get the follow-up email sent out?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was actually for the rest of the state and to train instructors. That was, Kim sent out the follow-up email. I was just making sure he saw that. It's got training instructors and so forth.
All right, so So having said that, today I didn't want to get into the absolute nuts and bolts
Okay.
because we're already at 12:20. And
Well, we said if we went after lunch, you were buying lunch, so we're good.
that's why I bought these. That's the healthy people. Anything else?
I just want, nothing towards that, but I don't want to close the meeting before I have an opportunity to speak.
Okay, all right, but this is not about the budget.
No, it's about all the discussion we had today.
Okay, so I'm gonna make this motion that we approve what's on. You ready?
What about the 2 million? Is that?
That will be equipment grant.
Okay, let
I'm
me
sorry.
plug it in.
Is that, everybody okay with that? When we put that in the equipment grant, we got a zero base at the bottom, right?
Yeah.
That's what I like to see. That's- So my motion is that we accept that as our spend plan for FY 26.
Just better clarify something.
Okay,
There's not gonna be any other processes done on the proposals. We're gonna just take them as they are, and we're gonna continue to fly by the seat of our pants the way we do things. I like his proposal.
so,
And I've stated I have a proposal, but we went from his proposal to, we'll have another one. Yeah, except as is, it's just boom, 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 approved.
so kind of flesh that out, Scott, because I'm not sure I understand what you're
Okay,
asking.
so the issue that we discussed about everybody kind of doing it different, circumventing the region councils. I wanted to state that my intent is to try to make sure that we have either a template or a way or a rule or something laid out to where this is the way that we're gonna do proposals in the future.
Well, in all honesty, that's the reason I was happy we voted to the ones, to what was there. Because we had told them, and in fact, is we put the discussion off one meeting to give them time to finish up their needs assessment. Okay, and I realize they've got a lot, and I realize probably a lot of them didn't recognize that that's what we were trying to do. But what I was trying to do, if they had not brought it back to that last meeting, then they didn't need to bring it back, okay? Now, the other process, I think we do need to have some discussions about, because I don't like the idea of the RTAC coordinators bringing this forward to us without the council's approval of doing it. So I think that's a fairly easy, again, I think that's an education process, I think. I think it's just that, and it may be a timing process, but now they know and they got a whole year to get that timing correct. Crystal's point, you know, you meet here and then 3 months later, the other group meets. That's difficult to work out sometimes. But I think going forward, the next meeting, I hope that slice and dice some of this. You know, Huey's point, well taken. Are we still good? Because in the past, we've had the whole gym sub thing up. We've had all of the RTACs up. I don't necessarily want to go, and Terry's got a great proposal about putting more money into the initial education, the EMT courses. I think we got to get a little bit more information, because if they're already funding all of them, can we get more funding if we put more money? Because some people not doing it because they don't have enough funds to pay for it locally. I don't know. There's still a lot out there unknown. But don't let me stop. I don't want to stop. I'll come back to it. But what I want to do is get this off my plate. All right. My motion is that this is our spend plan for FY 26. Do I have a second?
All right, so within this, we have the ability, like for my proposal later on, to move and allocate around or make changes to it, but you want a total budget.
Yeah.
Total budget approval.
EMS education at 1.9 essentially. Then we can slice and dice some of that. And then Huey's point about burn classes, maybe we don't do that. Maybe we put it in initial education. I don't know. I can't care. And right at the moment, I care, because burn classes are important, because there is a huge deficit, I think, in EMS knowledge about how to take care of burns. Did that answer the question?
It did. So that's what yes, you answered the question. It did for me.
Yeah, me too.
Okay.
Now, having said that, all of you at some point in time have gotten the different plans for all this money. The RTAC plan for these are in here.
Yes.
The GIMSA plan is in there. between now and the next meeting, go back and study it.
Yeah.
Take it back to your councils and say.
Just on a side note, this as an example. These are some of the things I plan to discuss is the EMS subcommittee of the trauma commissions is funding Northeast Georgia. Symposium, hospitals, the hospital fund gets way more than we get. They're funding the whole thing, which normally they charge a fee, which covers it. They're still gonna charge a fee and we're paying for the whole symposium.
Well, if y'all could bring that up in y'all's RTAC. And
It's not my RTAC. I mean, it's more.
Good point.
It's their
Our tax conference, it's not the hospital conference.
The hospital is a sponsor of their conference, but this is an RTAC conference.
It's Region Two conference. It's not Northeast Georgia's conference.
So here we go.
Says Northeast Georgia.
Did I get a second?
What they're
Yeah.
saying.
I got a
Well,
second.
it does on the proposal, but that's not what it is. Sorry.
Okay, got a motion and a second for this. All in favor, aye. All opposed, nay. We're good. Now, Scott, you wanna go back to any of that? Cause you got great points. I agree.
I think for today, the budget approved, I agree that we can have some discussion before we pinpoint this. It's been approved. I mean, we approved it as it is, so I don't know how we go back and say, well, now it's unapproved as is. Okay.
What
Yeah, if that's the case, we can
Courtney's
discuss
saying is, we can move some of those
Right.
dollars around
Okay.
within the buffer.
I'm good with
But
it.
hold on, you see, Region Two, $40,000. The US Education 1.8, we'll still talk about those things.
Okay.
I mean, we can.
Yeah, I know it's late, and I don't wanna keep it going, but I'm just wanna give y'all a little bit, I'm all for these people out, but
Yeah.
when the way I interpret this, is we're funding Northeast Georgia's trauma symposium, because that's what states on the sheet.
But I will say this, I think Northeast Georgia has a hospital system. At least in my outside looking in, is probably one of the most cooperative groups with EMS.
I agree 100%.
I don't look at them as siphoning off my money, I look at them putting a whole bunch of their money in what we do. And, had a conversation the other day with somebody and talking about, some of this stuff we're supporting. And we'll talk about it a little bit next week, particularly, some of the things that we're looking at.
Yeah,
I
that's
will
what
say
people
this.
here have heartburns about, hospital people attending EMS classes,
Yeah,
but the EMS is gonna pay $27,000 for their symposium.
well, again, I'd like for hospitals to come out.
I do too.
What's that
Because
proposal
it gets them,
Actually, it's the wording of their symposium. They call it the Northeast Georgia Trauma Symposium. It's not the hospital.
Yeah.
It's their
And
region.
there is a lot of confusion because
Yes.
even Region 10, which Northeast Health System, Region 2, even Region 10 is called Northeast Georgia EMS Council.
Yeah.
So there is a lot of confusion
Yeah,
on the
so-
naming.
But it's not Northeast Georgia
Yeah,
Medical Center
Yeah.
Trauma Symposium.
Yeah.
That's the name. And even on their things, it has the region on the conference thing, that region. That's what they call their region.
Similar
That's
to the Metro Atlanta EMS conference, like Metro Atlanta EMS is an agency, but the Metro Atlanta EMS conference is for Metro.
Yes.
So,
Yeah, so it's not a
It's
hospital.
confusing.
No, I get it, but our tax are made up of hospitals and EMS, correct? So it's got Northeast Georgia Medical Center's name on it. I forgot his name, Kyle. Told us that day, 40% of the people that come there are EMS. But EMS is funding 100% of the conference. That's my point.
Not anywhere close. to
No,
100%.
No.
they bring in national speakers, so that it's a very.
We're gonna cover a portion. What he requested was a portion of that budget. I believe that.
We'll discuss it more, but based off the numbers, he said, but what they charge per provider. The money that we were asking for us,
We're offsetting.
we're all
Okay.
way more than that. That's what I look at.
so I'm gonna put him on the spot. Cause I know we'll be looking at equipment grants and Lee Oliver's chairing a group to help adjudicate some of that. But I know that Terry had a concept of having a baseline for some of these smaller communities or smaller ambulance services. You want to just explain that, and I am not gonna take this up today, but I didn't want it sprung on you next meeting. Without y'all having some thought processes in it. I actually agree with it, but at the same time, I want everybody to have the ability to think through it.
Sure. Thank you. So, my concept, is basically EMT, and this is just for EMT and advanced EMT, not for first responder EMR classes. So EMT and advanced EMT classes, those classes are roughly 200 hours each. EMT is a little more, AMT could be as little as 180, but they're roughly 200 hours each. So we're currently woefully underfunding the cost, the instructional cost of a 200-hour class. So I was going to make a proposal to increase the funding for EMT classes and an advanced EMT class to an amount of probably around $12,000. So of that, 200 hours at $30 an hour, spreadsheet, I would expect to be on $6,000. One adjunct instructor for 75 hours in the class at $25 an hour with $18.75. And then I think $41.25 was the remaining difference out of the 12,000. That would cover 24 textbooks if it's a 24 student class. If it's less than 24 students, they could submit, receipts for, software they were using or IV arms or, whatever supplies that they use during the class, but they submit receipts for that. So instead of a complex formula where, they didn't receive the full EMT class funding, they would get the full 12,000, pay for half of it up front or some portion of it up front with all the initial rosters and all the things that they normally do. And then the remaining portion, half in my mind, but the remaining portion would be paid at the completion of the class with the submitting of the ending rosters, med ed prep and whatever else we had to do. But in my mind, for small rural counties just trying to attract instructors and trying to teach classes, I think this would give a reasonable funding. It's not high, it's not, $30 an hour for, a lead instructor is not an excessive, in my opinion, is not an excessive amount of money, but it would give a county the ability to take what they get from the grant and be able to pay an instructor and put a class on. So, is there anything I've said in that I've talked to a couple of y'all about it that I missed?
I'm kind of thinking that you may have a spreadsheet on this.
I do have a spreadsheet on it.
Would you send that out, send it to, Gabby and let her send the spreadsheet out? But that actually what I want you to speak to, because you talked about the equipment grant.
Yeah.
So run that by them very quickly and then we'll adjourn and go eat.
Okay. So in the equipment grant, one of the thoughts that I had in it is, I like the peak counts that we're doing right now. I think that's an equitable way of dispersing the equipment money. But when you look at the smaller services around the state, that only operate one truck, and last year's funding was at $1,777, that's not really that's not enough money to go and obtain a piece of equipment that's outside of your capital funding reach. So I was trying to think of a way to increase the floor, the lower amount, with a target being the smaller services, that are at 1, 2, 3, 4 truck, peak limits or whatever, so that they would have, an amount of money that they could do something meaningful with. Well, $1,700, or $3,400 for a small rural county that doesn't have any industry in it is that's just really not enough money to really make a meaningful impact. So I was gonna look at a proposal to go back to the bottom and just raise the bottom up so that, that a county somewhere between, $10,000 and $13,000, for the smaller counties would be a minimum funding,
So again, not anything to vote on. I just want y'all to get a chance to scratch your head about it. It might be interesting to do a spreadsheet on that because, as you have to do a little algebra to get those numbers.
That's it.
Well, I would think that maybe with the list that y'all have on what the proposed amount would be going for the providers, say if you put the floor at 5,000.
I've got a spreadsheet, so I've already been
then
working
you
on
could
it.
see
I just didn't have it fully vetted out, but I didn't wanna,
Send those
I didn't wanna
out.
throw it out here
Send
today.
those
But then you
out.
gotta worry about that piece of the pie
Send
there,
it- yeah.
because that's gonna increase the cost. Or it's gonna take away from the people that have more vehicles.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you.
So then you gotta
and
figure out
again,
where
that's the reason I wanted you to discuss it or think about it. Because if you raise it here, you've got to go somewhere with
But
it.
yeah, you could do a minimum.
Anything else that come before the group?
So can I make one more point to that, but while I've got an opportunity to speak? So in the proposal that I'm working on, no service will get any less than they got last year. So, if you're 15, 20 truck service or something like that, it wouldn't take anything away from them. And the version that I'm currently looking at, based on some feedback that I've gotten from, some other people is, like if a service had, 2 or 3 smaller counties, so, or let's say you got a big service that's got some smaller counties or whatever, they wouldn't get that minimum max, or that minimum dollar amount. They wouldn't get that again on top of it. So if your service is of a size that your peak trucks goes beyond this minimal amount, even with a combination of a couple of counties, you wouldn't go above, you wouldn't get any less than you got last year. But if you picked up a couple of small rural counties around you, it wouldn't be the $10,000 and $13,000, doubled back in on it for a larger scale service. So it doesn't take anything away from any service, even if you're a larger service. But it would put a floor in so that smaller services would have somewhere in that ballpark of capital money to be able to do something meaningful with.
Anything else? I would certainly entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Thank y'all so much. I got Snicker bars here. Thank you, anyone.
And the July meeting will be at the City of Madison Meeting Hall, so that'll be here. And I'll send you out the draft and parking recommendations for
Say it again, I missed one.
The next meeting.
Same meeting we met with Trauma Commission.
the July 10th.
It's located downtown, behind the fire station
When is our meeting?
in Matt.
So when is that? July the what?